A night in with Mauler and the drinker, getting trashed with the web stream dinkers. A cheap night cause I'm feeling kinda thrifty, got a 10-pack of beers and a bottle of whiskey. Hop up the cork, have a glass of wine, pass fail safe, I'll be fine. Trouble walking in a straight line, but pour me a Pinot Noir. It's open bar with our hosts, Mauler and the critical drinker.
Well, I think that's our cue to start, Mauler. There we go, there's our intro. Hello, everyone. And I'm sorry we're, like, extremely late and even more gay tonight, but that's just how we roll here on Open Bar. There is a reason for it, though, isn't there, Mauler?
There is a reason for it.
Yeah.
You know what? What kind of host would I be if I hadn't seen all of Andor? And so I started drinking, and I was like, oh, man, I'm right on episode 3. You could start the stream, or you could wait for little old Mutually, and you did, because you're a good friend. And
never leave a man behind. I mean, we couldn't start the stream without you.
Exactly. And here we are. Nobody will care now. It started anyway. It's all good.
Yeah, it's like, I'll just shut up, Mauler, and just get going. But yeah, you've seen Andor, and well, I guess we're going to talk about that. And we've got She-Hulk. We've got obviously we've got She-Hulk because the glory that is. We've got House of the Dragon, and we've got the glorious Rings of Power.
Streaming arc, man. All them shows just shoving out. That's crazy.
I know, it's keeping us busy at least.
Even Quantum Leap is out.
Quantum Leap, yeah. But we have some fine gentlemen here to discuss it with us, and it just occurred to me actually it's an all Brit panel tonight. So yes, we're representing. First up, we have got
the internet.
Yeah, we've got Disparu here as you've been on before, man, and it's always awesome to have you on. A voice of reason in an insane world.
Always a pleasure to be on. It's good fun. I was thinking as you were going through, it's amazing how many shows released all at exactly the same time. You have before this was a couple of months with nothing really to watch, and then suddenly everything landed. And it's been a mixed bag to say the least. I have seen Quantum Leap as well, and that was if you're gonna do a sequel to something, maybe not ignore the original entirely. You know, just an idea. But
is it a sequel? It's not a remake.
Yeah, it's supposed to continue. They briefly talk about how, he went away and they never came back. But that's kind of about it. They're like, oh no, we set it up again so we can find him, and then just ignore him for the rest of the episode. So whether that'll be a long arc and they go back to him, I don't know. I'd hope so, but it doesn't look like it so far.
You're going to be watching the whole thing? You're going to be checking it out?
I'll watch it, but considering I didn't even make a video on the first episode, it wasn't... It was very... It felt like a CW show. It really did. Lots of feelings in hallways. A plot that didn't make sense if you even thought about it briefly, and then it kind of finished. It wasn't like She-Hulk bad, but it just kind of existed for a while and then finished.
Mm-hmm. That seems like every show at the moment. It's like it's CW level of writing. We've also got we are joined again by Little Platoon, who's absolutely making a name for himself. And man, your breakdown of Rings of Power was just fantastic. Great review. And yeah, it's
he even managed to nail the Welsh lore. I didn't know he knew about it.
Just stick a bunch of consonants on the end of every word, and you're fine.
I've probably got some like secret Welsh ancestry somewhere, and it's a deep dark secret that no one's supposed to know. But yeah, no, I've
all of us.
I think I'm slightly losing my mind though, because we did that 12-hour EFAP yesterday. I think I've had about 2 hours sleep. I've now gone back to back for She-Hulk, and I'm sort of midway through Andor at the moment. She-Hulk is already got this special locker in my mind where I push things which are vaguely traumatic. And Andor, I gather things happen in episode 3, which I haven't yet got to, so I'm going to be relying on you guys for that. It's sort of been a bit soporific until that point, which is maybe not the best thing.
I think the first half is definitely the weakest.
I think episode 3 would give you a lot more context. There's a bit more payoff to some of this stuff, and some relatively well done action scenes. I mean, I don't know. Look, what do you guys want to start with? Because we've got like 4 different things we can cover
got a buffet
tonight. Yeah, it's like and it's a real mixed bag as well. Like, do we want to start with the good, the bad, or the ugly?
To clarify, by the way, I do just want to let you know that wasn't some kind of meme from Little Platoon. We spent 11.5 hours talking about Rings of Power episodes 3 and 4. 3 and 4.
And then I had to commute
That's how long
to
it
That's all I
feels
can
like.
say.
commuting to London for the day job, like an hour and a half after we finished. So
Yeah.
it's been one of those days. I'm kind of tempted because this percent, there's been so much that's come out. It's almost tempting just to do one big video, just call it the smorgasbord of shite, and then just cover all of them in one video, get them out of the way, and then maybe I'll have some time. But it's there'll be something else as soon as I've got to grips with the current slate. We've got Black Panther 2 coming out, so that's going to be a lot of fun. There's
I'm
not
sure
going to
it'll be
be a
great.
stop this year, I don't think. Might reward myself at Christmas with
Well, yeah,
just a bottle of whiskey.
Because the past month or so, like August was just an incredibly slow month where it felt like there
drought.
really wasn't much going on, and yeah, it's almost like what the fuck do we even have to talk about at this point? But like now, suddenly there's just the floodgates are opened, and it's a deluge of
Never
content.
have I more valued a calendar, dude. The amount of things I've agreed to and topics I've covering and how to fit them all in is insane. Because
It
all
was
4 of these
almost
shows,
worse.
I'm supposed to see and review them, and I start to forget, like, wait, did I agree to go on a stream? And oh fuck, like, I'm just like, yeah, I can make it. Yep.
Because there was a lot of delays. I think Andor got delayed a month, so that would have
did, yeah.
started the same time as like
Yeah.
House of the Dragon and Rings of Power.
Good
I
God,
mean-
could you imagine?
Yeah.
Would I be right in saying that Andor was like filmed way before most of the other shows, and it was
Yeah,
like
it's-
shelved for a long time?
Well, I don't know if you guys would disagree, but I think that with zero context, you can tell this was not made with the same sort of teams that were behind Kenobi, Boba Fett, and Mando.
I
This
was
is
going to
something
say,
else.
and maybe it makes sense to start with Andor since it's kind of the new thing. It's new kid
The
on the
cool
block.
kid on the block.
It is, and I'm going to start with something I really didn't think I would say about a Disney Star Wars show. I kind of liked it. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's a bit of a slow burner, and I'm shook at the fact that I quite enjoyed it. But I can tell that it's competently directed. It looks very like grounded and gritty, and like kind of low level stuff. Like it's just kind of character based drama more than anything else. And it feels like it was actually written by people who somewhat resemble human adults, compared to like everything else that Disney's put out in the Star Wars universe. You know, the characters actually kind of act like human beings, and yeah, like when you get to that third episode, there's, you know, even if you, when it comes down to like the security troops who kind of conduct themselves in a professional manner and actually put some thought into what they do and how they deploy. I was really surprised at the level of intelligence that seemed to have gone into it, and so it's been way better than I thought it would be. It's got plenty of issues for sure, but it's not terrible as far as I can tell.
Would you have still have had the same opinion if they hadn't released 3 and they'd only released 2 episodes?
I think I would still have praised the sort of tone and the direction and so on, because that hasn't changed. It's just you get a fair amount more payoff with this, and it does. It feels like they have kind of split a pilot episode into like three other episodes and maybe stretched it out a little bit too much. But yeah, I don't really stand by the criticisms that it's boring. It's just a slow burner, and like it kind of pays off ultimately.
Here's another question. Would you be saying the same thing if Boba Fett and Kenobi never actually came out?
This is what I asked myself, and you'd have to go back even further than that and say,
Yeah,
would I
you
be
would.
asking myself if the sequel movies hadn't come out. And yeah, I think in that context, I might be like, this just feels weird and it doesn't really feel like Star Wars. But yeah, in the context that we have, it's probably the least shit thing that Disney have put out in the Star Wars universe so far. I don't know what to say. Like, I don't hate it.
I've heard
It's weird.
it doesn't feel like Star Wars land from a few people. I can kind of see where that's coming from. I don't know that I'd even really level that as a criticism. I mean, quite a lot of people have been saying for quite some time that one of the many things Star Wars needs to do is to move on and to actually do something different than the Skywalker arc or even any grand adventure that's tied to Galactic Empire. Now, of course, this hasn't gone away in terms of its timeline, but it does seem, from what I've seen of it anyway, to at least be trying to tell a different type of story, similar, I guess, in the way that Rogue One did, and it's sort of its strength that it hasn't got so much baggage. It didn't have the weight of expectation, much as Rogue One wasn't particularly anticipated. Andor hasn't really been looked forward to by a great many people. No one's really put a huge amount of stock in it. And it doesn't have a huge amount that it can really cock up because it's not playing around with any established character other than those established just in that one film in Rogue One.
I think it's the epitome of this. Yeah, it's the epitome of the small scale drama. And so, yeah, like there's no, at this point, there's no massive stakes involved. Like there's no like really important characters that, you know, the fate of the Republic is. Yeah, like these are the guys who are in this are like the level below stormtroopers. They're like corporate security men.
And oh my God, how just it's because like this is the thing. I've got so many thoughts about this at once, but that's one of the things I actually really liked was I'm tired of all the Star Wars stuff. And, you know, because I flash back, I'm assuming you guys are all aware of this, but Grace Randolph has that viral clip of she's like, there's no interesting things in this. There's no Death Star, there's no Stormtroopers, there's no Vader, there's no Moff Tarkin, there's no Leia. What am I supposed to talk about? It's like, oh my God, stop. Like, stop, I swear to God. The fact that we have this burly security guard man who passionately explains, like, law and order is important and that we're going into disrepair, and that when he finds out some of his men are getting killed before the reinforcements have arrived, and he passionately is like, no, we got to get to them and help them. I was just like, I'm not familiar with this coming from Star Wars. I don't understand. I've never seen this before. Like,
sorry, on you go.
It's, for me, I do agree, I like the world and I like the setup. But those first 2 episodes, you could have made that in 10 minutes and stuck it in the 3rd episode, and no one would have known any difference. Like, you can say it's a slow burn, but literally, like, nothing happened in those first 2 episodes. The entire stories were pointless. And I liked the 3rd a lot more than I did the first 2, but I was actually surprised when the second one ended, because I'm like, this entire thing was pointless. It didn't go anywhere, it didn't serve any pointless. There was no reason for that to exist. And I think it could have been greatly cut down, and it would have been much better. But also to the Star Wars point, don't you think there are some core points to an IP which have to exist for it to be counted as that IP? Like, I know there are non-Force people in Star Wars, but if you're gonna do that, it could be any other IP in the world. And I think then you get down to the point of, does it gain anything from being the Star Wars IP, or would it just have been better being its own thing?
I get what you're saying. I think on that point, there's a smart way of doing that, a subtle way, and a lazy way. And the lazy way is to have lightsabers and stormtroopers and star destroyers and TIE fighters, just all those like recognizable pieces of equipment and ships and all that sort of thing, which is just the surface level stuff. What this does is sets it in the Star Wars world, and like the world building is slowly built up. You know, you get the idea of this being like some backwater planet that's like some industrial wasteland, you know, and like the people that are scratching out in existence there are the lowest of the low. But the little tidbits of like the world building that it gives you about the state of the galaxy and what the Empire actually does, I think in this case it works to the show's benefit. It's like those things suddenly become a lot more interesting. Like if you were to see just a stormtrooper now, it would be an interesting event, because you've established that these guys only show up when the shit hits the fan, and like keeping order in these little planetary systems, like out in the middle of nowhere. It's just up to the local, you know, police forces. And so you establish
guards,
you established a sort of set of stakes, and so things become a lot more meaningful when they do start to work them in. And I'm sure they will as the show progresses, because we're only 3 episodes in, and I think there's quite a few coming up. And I like this approach. I like the fact that it doesn't just blow its load immediately and be like, come on, see all this stuff that you remember? Here's some Death Stars. Here's some, like, Stormtrooper uniforms. For me, I think it works okay. Like, I get your point, though, that this, as it stands right now, could essentially just be a generic sci-fi story, kind of anywhere. But I think the characters and stuff are well-developed enough that I can live with it as it is.
Yeah.
Cassian?
Connecting it to...
Do you think Cassian actually, like... do
you
care about Cassian at all? Because I don't.
He was the weakest aspect in a lot of ways, and I think some of it comes down to, like, maybe the actor doesn't have a huge amount of charisma. The character wasn't massively interesting in Rogue One, and so he's kind of tainted by that. But But again, like they give him a backstory, they give kind of an explanation for how he came to be in this place, and he's, you know, at this point he's not like the resistance fighter that we see him as later. He's just a guy looking for his sister and kind of panicked by what's going on. He doesn't have the answers.
I thought it was curious that the first sort of significant thing that happens in the show, like the first scene where he kills the two, you could call them muggers, I guess. It's kind of an echo of his first scene in Rogue One, right? Because there's a scene I won't forget because I remember how I felt watching it. I was just like, whoa, Star Wars, look at you having a good guy kill one of his friends in order to prevent him from being captured by it. I was like, oh, that's a little bit edgy of you to do. Didn't expect that. But then I don't think Rogue One really follows through on that expectation, that it's a film about like the worser parts of the good guys and the better parts of the bad guys. And I was curious if that's what this show is going to try and do, especially considering the security force. I really think they tried to put effort into being like, hey, the security guys, they're not just like crazy meathead bad guys who are killing everybody.
They're kind of there to just maintain law and order, and like for the most part, they seem fairly like, okay, you know, they're quite they crack down quite hard on people, but like they're not going to just kill people indiscriminately. And this is another thing I really like about this show. Like the death of a person is actually considered to be quite a big event. Like if someone gets murdered or killed in a battle, like that's a big deal. Like it would be in our world, and so it gets reflected. Like crimes are followed up on. When Andor kills those two guys at the beginning, like that triggers a chain of events that brings down, you know, all this heat on him.
And I kind of like that, I don't know what to call him, like chief or whatever you want to say about him, but just the fact that he's very matter of fact. He's clearly quite experienced. He knows exactly what's going on with all of this and tells this new guy how it works, right? We cover it up. It's not worth following. Whoever killed them, you know, they were the idiots that got themselves in this position. Ultimately, the less eyes we have on us from the Empire, the better everybody here can function, including you. Like it came across as kind of a threat as well. Like, don't screw this up.
He demonstrates a good insight into, like, you know, because he talks about how, you know, these guys were at a brothel that isn't supposed to exist, and it's an expensive one that they shouldn't be able to afford, and like all this stuff that he understands. Like these guys were way across the line anyway, and like if all that came out, it would reflect on him as much as anything else.
And the crime rates go up.
Yeah, and so it's just a very human, I guess, little side story that kind of makes sense in context.
That was what I wanted to like come out in the first episodes. Rather than talking about like a mechanic and a boyfriend and stuff, they could have gone further into what on earth they were doing in that place in the first place. Because they went in, spoke to someone, and just left immediately. So they were only after like as much information as he was, and it's just kind of ignored. Maybe they'll pick it up later on, but I needed desperately more plot. And like for me, the problem is definitely the first two episodes. I just think they needed more story. Because
I can understand why you feel that way. I can see it because, like, I think the first episode is literally just like Andor walking around talking to people, and we meet them and find out who they are, I guess, which isn't exactly very.
It was largely the second episode was a lot of people going, "We're traveling here." It's like
I was going to say first and second. I mean, there's a couple of things that don't qualify as those in the first and second, I guess. I'm trying to think, but the third one definitely is like, oh, okay, now we're kicking into gear. We're doing things.
If it had started with the third, I'd have a different opinion on it.
The problem if you want things to happen and you want Andor to be defined immediately by the things that happen within it, then you risk throwing people into what is essentially a series of contrived events with characters they don't know or don't remember or don't care about. Now, I'm not saying that their attempts to make us care about the character in these long, slow moments are particularly successful. But I think you do actually have to do that, given that what Star Wars is trying once again to do is to prove that it is actually bigger than the Jedi and that it can tell stories that are realistic and that don't require the swinging around of lightsabers or the frequent presence of convenient icons like the Death Star. I think we'll get some of those later. It's tried this a couple of times. If you remember, when The Mandalorian first came out, The Mandalorian is also kind of ponderous. I mean, it has a much stronger MacGuffin from the off, but it's still this small-scale, quite world-rich telling of a story. I mean, what it wants to do first and foremost is to flesh out this backwater part of the universe that nobody has seen before. It doesn't want to wow you with events straight away. I mean, The Mandalorian very quickly changed its approach and now has the lightsabers and all the rest of it. But when it started, it was trying to do, I think, a slower, more loving exploration of the world. Andor is doing that in a darker way, and it's trying to be more serious about it. It doesn't yet have that strong sort of MacGuffin pull. And I actually quite like that it doesn't. I think if you had just launched straight into action and straight into event, and we're just expected to immediately re-inhabit Andor, who very few people actually managed to inhabit in Rogue One anyway, we would just have been thinking, this is actually more of a generic Star Wars show than we got, because it's just character on screen, moving, fight, move, fight, move, fight, end. I'm quite happy that they didn't do that.
I'm on about like actual plot, not just people talking to each other about nothing in particular in rooms.
I suppose arguably everything with the security guards would be that, right?
The security guards was largely explaining how the system worked, so I wouldn't actually count that because you learned information from that. But things like her and her husband, and like when you're asked to recall like 40 minutes of stuff stubs that was so like boring, calling back specific scenes. What I mean is, did you ever watch Spartacus? I think Spartacus does a great job of mixing plot, like political plot and maneuvering around, with action. I think you can have action scenes and plot together, and I don't even think, like in the first 2 episodes, there was much plot actually done at all. It was, like, for instance, that robot, right? That robot went across the floor for like 3 minutes, and it didn't do anything. There was no point to that 3 minutes unless you're going to turn out to murder yourself. Well, yeah. Exactly. At the start, he's walking down a corridor. It takes 4 minutes until he's out of that first building.
A lot of this stuff,
nothing.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff I would like put under the category, and this is probably an example of like where the writing wasn't as efficient as it could be, because you can either do some world building, you can do character development, or you can advance the plot, and ideally you should be able to do all three at the same time if you're really good at writing. One that first 2 episodes fell into the trap of was a lot of world building, just allowing you to kind of soak up, I guess, the culture of this world, this backwater place. There was lots of fairly long establishing shots of just people going about their lives, and like Andor making his way down the streets and things like that, and bumping into people, and just things like that. And ideally that could have all been integrated slightly better to the point where like you're advancing the plot, but you also get to this feel of the world, and you can learn things about him and other people as you go. As it stands, it kind of does each thing separately. That's probably why those first 2 episodes feel so long, because it's a slightly inefficient way of doing it. But again, I guess I fall into this category of I care more about things that happen once I feel like I'm invested in that world, once I feel like it's lived in and it's plausible, and that's what I get from this. When it comes to like the world of Boba Fett, for example, didn't give a shit about any of it because it's all just nonsense. Like I didn't care about it. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel believable. This kind of does, and the staging of it I think really helps. The way it's directed, it doesn't just feel like it's a really hastily contrived set with a projector around it to give you the sense that you're somewhere else. Kind of feels like a real place, and all of that stuff combined together just made me feel like, all right, this is a place that I can get invested in. Even if Andor, I know what's going to happen to him ultimately, I'm kind of interested in to see where this goes. Because again, the characters feel like they're part of this world, that they're more real in that sense. And it all just, I don't know, it gives things more significance, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
It does allow for the telling of stories that you wouldn't get if you did have grand narrative type Star Wars. I mean, you can't do localism in grand narrative stories, or at least it's very, very difficult to do that. And it's still too early. So I always thought that this, to the extent Andor might not be terrible, I think it was always the case that it might even be helped by the fact we already know how it ends, because it's not then going to get pretensions. It's not going to get taken away with itself. It's not going to go around saying we are going to redefine the entire Star Wars universe. We're going to tell the next big saga. It can't do that. Obviously, it's time limited, and that does allow it more time to explore the world. It's also answering, some of the more intriguing questions. I think one of the only intriguing questions that was ever raised in The Mandalorian, again, was when they have Werner Herzog's character saying the Empire improves every system it touches. And that's an interesting idea, but you don't really get to see life under the Empire. And that's the first sort of hint we get at the Empire's perspective, and that perhaps there is a material, economic, social reason that the people haven't rebelled against the Empire yet. The Mandalorian doesn't really go on to explain or to explore
No, it only
that.
baited it.
Yeah, this show seems to be paying a bit more attention to that. I would agree with you. I think if it would be nicer if it had stronger characters. It would be nicer perhaps if it had a stronger through line in plot across the first 2 episodes. But I think there is still, it's still worth praising it for what it has done well, or reasonably well, or surprisingly well, which is the world building stuff. The problem's going to be is, does it come off the rails later on when it decides it wants to portray the Empire as allegory? And a lot of the interviews and the pre-publicity material would seem to suggest that they are going to try and use the Empire as allegory for modern day political concern. You're going to get fairly objectionable, strong woman character who's an Imperial officer that we're going to have to admire because she's more competent at genociding than the men are, for example. That's sort of the takeaway of one of the interviews. And whether they want to do, as some of the other people have famously said, the migrant experience, are they going to really, really smash you over the head with that later on? I think it will come off the rails if it does that, because, okay, it might have done some things well in terms of its world building so far, but it's not built up the kind of affection that makes me sort of want to lie down and let it have its way with me like that. So we'll
that's the benchmark for any show, really. When you were talking about the character who's going to be introduced later on, who's like the Imperial officer, that's like your generic strong female character. One thing that did jump out at me, actually, that was kind of shocking, is that the girlfriend of Andor, and I can't remember the character's name for the life of me. I think it's only mentioned like once or something. But like when she gets arrested by the security forces, and like the camera's really close in on her as they're approaching her to arrest her, and she's got like her hands up like that. And I was just bracing myself for another ridiculous girl boss moment where she turns around and disarms them and kicks the shit out of like 5 guys all at the same time. And it doesn't happen. They just arrest her and handcuff her to a wall, and that's it. Like, she's out of the game. And I thought,
I think they even hit her as well.
Holy shit! This is like being real. It's like being realistic about what people can actually do. I'm shocked.
I don't think that's not his girlfriend, right? That's the other guy's girlfriend. Well,
Yeah. I don't know. It kind of implies that they've got a past history.
I think they're exes. I don't know, but funnily enough, I feel like this was going to be a problem, that if this show was going to be even halfway enjoyable, that it's still not going to make Andor someone that I like. It's going to be someone else, and I'm actually like more fond of the Captain Security Guard man than most of these characters. I actually feel like they've been put in. I don't know if you guys picked this up, but in his scenes, I was like, when we first meet him, he's almost very nervous and forthcoming with his boss, and he's shocked that the boss is basically like, let's cover up these murders. Obviously, from the boss's point of view, he has his argument, but to him, that's like horrifying, because he's trying to uphold law and order. He wants to make sure that the will is served, and he even like exclaims like, they were murdered, like it's unethical. It's horrible that we wouldn't try and search this out. And his story just seems to be like, I want to find who killed them. And there's this moment where he's standing outside of the, I guess, security booth, or whatever booth it is that they do whatever things they cover. And he's very nervous before he goes in. But once he's in, he's very stern and critical of the men working there. And everyone he encounters in the Empire's like running buildings are all just kind of like, why are you doing this? Why do you care? Like, well, yeah, whatever. He's like, I'm going to have to search through and spool through all of this footage and all this information relating to these ships coming in and out all day. And he's like, yeah, do it, or I'll find someone else. And the guy's like, shit, okay, geez. And then there's other people who are just like, why are we doing this? And it's just like, because I want you to do your fucking jobs. I was like actually enjoying that there's the idea of this character who's risen up the ranks, because you meet these people in real life who like come into maybe a store you're working in, and everyone's got a way of doing things, even if it breaks the rules or this, that, and the other. And this person's just like, let's make this place better. Let's actually do something. And he meets this absolute boulder of a human being who's like shares his interest in trying to make things run properly. And I think they really rounded him out quite well with he was at gunpoint and he was terrified, and he just like gave Andor anything he wanted. He just like, please don't kill me. He was like this. I just think that they've given him a lot of layers already so far, and I have no idea what they're going to do with this guy, or what kind of journey they're going to put him on. But I like that he's not they're not the bad guys being stupid and evil and they need to be stopped. If anything, I could see them being galvanized against people like Cassian with good reason. It's like, look at the damage these people fucking cause. Look how much destruction has come as a result of them.
Yeah.
My favorite part with him was when the car got blown up and he's just standing there like almost kind of PTSD, has no idea what to do or how to handle it. And it was only because the other guy, which had more experience of it, just came up and basically pulled him out of the yacht. Like, we need to go. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And you've seen that in other kind of war movies and stuff, but I've never seen anything like that in Star Wars, where a death is just kind of, yeah, we carry on.
There's just a lot of smart decision making, like from those guys, and just it kind of points to like the writers being fairly like switched on to how these things would actually be done. You know, even where they've got the old lady prisoner, and you know they need to go and help out their buddies who've got like Andor and the other guy pinned down, and initially, you know, the deputy inspector is just like, oh, leave one man here to guard her. And the Scottish guy's like, no, it's getting kind of ugly out there. They know we're here. Like the locals, better leave 2 or 3 guys here, like as backup, because this could get difficult. And I just thought that line didn't need to be in there, but it just shows that like they wanted to show that these guys are relatively experienced with crowd control, with managing these locals, and it's just smart little details like that I appreciated, and it just shows that like a bit of care and thought's gone into this.
That was another bit I liked, and it was in that same scene where they're getting panicked because there's an alarm going off and they have no idea what it means. They just know there's a lot of people and it's coming from all around them. And she's like, it's not the fact that when it's going that you need to worry, it's when it stops. And the moment it stops, they just panic and run. Those are the kinds of things I liked, but everything that I like for that kind of thing tends to be from episode 3, because I think that's where you get to see the characters put into a situation which is kind of new. And maybe it was because it was outside their comfort zone and it allowed more exploration of how these characters would react than just, oh, I'm in an office kind of thing.
I do wonder how effective I would have found the chaos relating to like Security Guard Man had I not had episode 1 and 2 first. Because one of the things I quite enjoyed was that if this were Rings of Power or whatever else shitty TV show like She-Hulk, you know the scene where they're rallying up their troops, they're explaining the situation to the Security Guard team and what they're going to have to do. You got the Boulder Man is like very straightforward, brass tactics. He knows exactly what to say to these guys, and he's being honest with them, what they're in for. And I even like that he says, like, you know, this guy's armed and dangerous. He took out 2 of our guys. Like, let's not fuck around. This guy could kill us, you know, so be careful. And then he's like, right, now, you know, our captain or whatever. And he, if you look at the words he actually says, they're not that bad. They're like quite encouraging and motivational. It's the delivery. It's really stilted and awkward with pauses. And everyone's sort of just like, yeah. You know, he's like, today is going to be a day for justice and courage.
Yeah, and he says like, there's not another there's no team I would rather go into this situation with than you guys. And you know, if he delivered it with more conviction, that might have been kind of a rousing speech. But like you say, it's just kind of, he's nervous, he doesn't quite know what to say, and he's just kind of reeling off the corporate kind of speak. And again,
please clap sort of speech.
Yeah, but again, like it doesn't totally humiliate him, and it's not a ridiculous scene. It's just like, if you pick up on the fact that he's just not quite there as an inspiring leader in combat situations, and it's relatively subtle as these things go, but it's effective in fleshing out where he's at as a character and what his level of experience is.
What I was going to say is, if it were the shittier TV shows, I feel like we would have had a scene right after with 2 of the security guard people being like, man, his speech, he must have been so insecure about his abilities. And gosh, he seems like he wouldn't be able to hold himself in an actual fight. It's like he's been a pencil pusher his whole life. He knows all the bureaucracy and politics of this sort of stuff, but he just wouldn't be able to be in a real fight. And then they show it and they're like, there you go, audience, do you understand? Because as you were saying, like, he gets a gun to his head and he's fucking shaking and sweating. He gets tied up. And the second they release him, he's like angry. He's like, you know, they're there, go get up. Like, even though in the moment he was like pissing himself. And then when he realizes they've tricked them all right after they think they've got them, and they've lost basically their whole team. There's like 3 of them that are unharmed at this point and several that are dead. And he's just like, what the fuck? Like, this was horrifying. And what was it? Searching for one guy and hoping to find him because they think he murdered 2 people. And it's a complete disaster. Because this is the one thing I'm actually looking forward to in the next episode, is the repercussions from the Empire. Surely they're going to be like, what the hell is going on down there? You've lost all of these guys. There's explosions. The town is like pissed off at everybody here. His superior officer, whoever that guy was, because I didn't catch his name, I imagine he's going to be like, what the fuck have you done?
Yeah.
Like, why did you authorize all of this, you insane idiot?
Yeah. I think
You
that's
also-
good because I assume that's kind of why he looked so shocked in that
That too,
moment
yeah.
because he was kind of contemplating the repercussions for his career and like maybe even his life for having done this raid and completely fucked it up.
You also had interesting decisions with Skarsgård because he was actually saying, "I will kill this man." So, and you could say that, oh, he's just trying to get information out of him. But then later on, they were driving off. There was no reason to blow up that car and get everyone. Kind of did that because he wanted to.
Yeah.
And so he could easily, like, it doesn't really make sense why he spares one guy and not the others. And if you're
Presumably,
Cassian,
Andor
it
would have
would
stopped
be-
him from doing that one, yeah.
yeah, well, that's the thing. Will Cassian have problems with him? The fact that he's willing to go to more lengths than Cassian is, kind of thing. That's kind of where I'd like it to go, sort of the sort of interpersonal stuff.
Yeah,
With regards to the main soldier, the one who got shell shock, I can't remember his name. But it does seem like they're setting up that all of his higher ups and the people around him are idiots rather than him. So I do wonder if they're just going to pick out a couple of people within that whole thing and make everyone else just like, as I said, lazy, incompetent people.
I don't know if they're necessarily going to make them idiots, but I think it's more like he's so idealistic and so driven because like he's not doing this. I don't get the impression he's doing this for promotion or personal gain. It's like he just has this really like strong sense of justice, almost like in doing his job, and I think that puts him at odds with the more cynical guys around him. Not
Yeah, I
that
wouldn't say
they're idiots, but they're more just like
They're
realist
complacent.
about. Yeah. And I think what they'll eventually set up is like a redemption arc for him, where he's gonna like turn to the resistance almost, because it's like he realizes he's just gonna get fucked over by like everyone else around him. No one cares.
Because if you think about it, I wouldn't call his superiors stupid when he said, "Let's just class these as killings or accidents." That they were doing something good. Something I quite liked when he said something, inspiring but mundane. Like
Yeah.
we don't want it to be too interesting. But I was just like, wow, because you could be like, well, that's a crazy move. It's like, well, if they'd done that, things would be a lot better. So many people would be alive where they aren't now if they had just done that. It seems like everyone there is very familiar with the systems and how they work. This guy is not, and he's trying to run by the book, which is not like it's not a realistic thing. And he's learning like already how fucking bad things can go.
It's a good way
I
of
don't think he
building
did
out
it
worlds as well, though, like that, isn't it? Because you don't ever see in the real world any totalitarian system, any ideological system even, which is kept running because every single person in it is an ideologue and is passionate and is sort of the evil mastermind of the group. Like most of these settings, whenever they are actually believable, do go for that banality of evil aspects. You will get some ideologues, you will get some idealists as well. But when it comes to the imposition of any kind of sort of fascist dictatorship system like the one you see in the Empire, you have to realize that actually for a large number of people, this isn't anything exceptional. This isn't something you really believe in or otherwise. This is the system you live in. And you have some very small-minded men who just very much like getting to the top of any particular system, especially if it gives them that sort of like micro-totalitarian, micro-megalomaniacal, that's the word, power over their fellow people.
I'm glad you said that because I couldn't help.
took a run up at that one. So I quite like that they have this spread of characters. But the other thing I think, I mean, there's the question that we raised earlier about, is are we just praising this by comparison because everything else that's come out around it has been
Definitely.
so terrible? I think there must be a degree of that being the case. But also, I think some of the criticisms that are being raised here suggest that no, there is actually something genuinely of merit in the show itself as well. Like you don't make the kinds of points that have been made so far if there's nothing the show could stand up and say, well, I own this, and actually this is quite good in its own right. Sure, it's lovely that we're not sitting here saying like, why the hell did he say I grew up surrounded by water? Or I wonder which sand monster he's going to try and fly a spaceship into this week. Like, we're not having to say any of that. That's good. But we are actually having to make some slightly more interesting criticisms of the show itself. So it's not just that it isn't stupid. I think there are some good things in it it's doing as well. It's just, again, the question is whether it can sort of keep these up without falling for allegory again.
Well, I think it's
night
potential.
and day compared to those other shows.
Yep.
I think its potential is where it could go. Like you said, Cyril could go to the rebellion, or he could become that absolutely domineering, I've risen up the ranks because I'm more competent than everyone else and I'm willing to go the extra mile, and just be like, to save my people, I will entirely just control everything from the top down and go completely too far the other way.
He could go Iron Fist mode after all this sort of thing.
This, I think, is to the show's credit that we're having these kind of discussions about what they could do with these characters, and we're interested enough to care. With so many other shows, it would just be a case of pointing and laughing at how comically ridiculous it all is. And so with this, it's like there's a lot of interesting aspects of it to explore, and I think, damn, the fact that a Star Wars show has managed to do that for us at this point, when we're so jaded with all of this stuff, is pretty damn impressive.
It was
If
made.
it had finished at episode 2, I would be on the I hate this with a passion.
Yeah.
There's 3, which entirely changed my opinion on the show. My issue is I review things episodically, and now
Right.
I've seen them all, and so I'm going to have to review 2 as 2 rather without thinking of 3.
I will. I guess I'll stake it. I'll go as far as saying if it were just one episode, I would have said I'm all right with this. I would have given it a little smirk. I'm fine. This is fine. I wouldn't want, because when you say like, oh, I hated this, it's like, oh, dude, when like, I makes me think of stuff like Kenobi where it's just like we gotta rush and get him to fight Vader. Like that shit pisses me off to no end. But in a show where it's just a bunch of people I've never seen before living their mundane lives, and we're getting some dialogue, it's just like, well, there's nothing that's really gonna piss me off here. But simultaneously, I'm not too jazzed. I'm just like, all right, this is happening.
The first episode made me think about how I rate things. Because the first episode, I couldn't even really form an opinion on it. It just I felt like it just existed for a while. And so I was like, does that mean it's a 5? Or does that mean it's really awful? Because I wasn't entertained at all. And I kind of came down on the side of, I'm going to start things at 0, and you have to entertain me to get points, rather than starting at 5 and knocking things down because I think it's awful. Because I do like the settings, I like some of the characters, I just didn't like the pacing, and I think they actually needed to do stuff. So I wasn't really going to knock stuff down. So it was either going to be a low mark or I had to work out where I was going to start on the scale. But I'm glad I got to episode 3.
I honestly think they kind of got me with the first killing, where Andor takes out those 2 guys, because
I like that scene.
It's just, after seeing like so many people just get mown down with no consequence, and I didn't give a shit about any of them in all the other TV shows. This was a time when you have a guy begging for his life, like knowing, oh shit, like you've killed my friend. I know exactly what's going through your head now. You're going to eliminate me so there's no witnesses, because otherwise, why would you let me live? I'm going to beg for my life now. I'm going to try and come up with a plausible excuse that we can make. We can square this away. Please don't pull the trigger. And Andor hesitates for a second. And I just think that was all a very human reaction to this.
The guy he shot was a moron, though, wasn't he? He's
He
literally
was.
like, I'm going to arrest you anyway. You're not in a position to bargain there, mate.
But it's just a desperate man trying to
Yeah.
plead with whatever he thought he could come up with in the moment. And, it became like a scene where, oh, wow, death has some kind of consequence here. Like, these are characters who are going to plead for their life before they're just gunned down. And I thought that's pretty cool, pretty smart.
I also
Something
just-
you see very often in Star Wars.
I liked the lighting in that scene. I liked that they kept the camera on Andor's face for about a whole minute when they were like heckling him, getting closer and closer, and then they pulled the gun on him. But we only saw his expressions while they were doing the whole thing. Which again, I kind of agree that is his name Diego Luna? That's the actor's name, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he's fantastic. I'm hoping he can maybe change my mind on him as the show goes on, perhaps. But I just appreciated that level of filmmaking compared to what we usually get, which is like an AI constructs the shots or something.
Yeah.
It's
I
felt like
think,
it was made by a person who cared about something.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think with him, where he falls short is like there's a couple of scenes where they try to set him up as almost like a Han Solo, like charming rogue character, where he owes money to people and he kind of has to bullshit his way out of it. And someone like Harrison Ford can pull that off fantastically, as we know. But like when Diego Luna has to do it, it's like, oh, you're a bit flat. Like it's like
He
you're kind of a
literally-
bit lost there.
He literally turned around to the guy behind him, said, I can't believe you're doing this, and walked off. And we're supposed to believe he got out of it. I didn't like
Yeah.
that scene at all.
They might have a
I
problem
liked
with
the
him.
big lumbering creature though that was just a chill dude. Like
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. I don't know.
had to stand here.
He's like friends with him. So it's like, why bring him for muscle when they're friends, you idiot? Like,
I'm slightly, because I think it's I can't remember how many episodes are there in total in this show, because it's more than the usual 6
12.
to 10 we're getting. It's 12, isn't it? Yeah. I do wonder whether or not they will end up running into trouble with Cassian Andor as a character, though, because on the one hand, I think, as we said earlier, that it's benefiting from having a a story that already has an end. The problem is that his character already has something of an arc. We've already seen sort of his world weary, cynical, but then sort of redemptive moment. We've got all of that in Rogue One. We've already seen that. Are we going to get any kind of variety from him across 12 episodes of this show? I mean, is he starting from a high enough position of, say, enthusiasm, morals, and ideas to then lower himself during the course of this show in order for him to be raised up again when we come to watch Rogue One later in the timeline? Or is he going to be quite sort of one tone and monotonous quite quickly? Is there enough variety in his character, or potential variety in his character?
I think they've got a decent starting point in that he's not invested in the Resistance or anything at this point. All he wants is to try and find his sister, and so he's just a normal guy who's been thrust into a really difficult situation because of his own fuck-ups, as he admits. And so I guess his arc is going to be like, well, gradually he's going to learn the purpose of the Resistance, and he's going to become invested in their mission. He's going to turn against the Empire, which he probably didn't even care about up until this point. And so that, I guess, is enough of an arc for me to say, okay, fine, that'll do, I guess. Like, we're going to see his transformation from, a frightened civilian who doesn't, he's in over his head, to a hardened Resistance fighter who's willing to take the tough decisions. So I think that's fair enough. That'll do as an arc. For me, anyway.
The way for someone to disagree or agree, we're all just like,
Yeah. I know, I agree. I think it could be. I just wonder if they've got the because you'd have to do something quite subtle with that, wouldn't you? Because you'd still have to create variety in character and experience anyway. You'd have to create sort of ebbs and flows in that character arc, which, because it is a relatively muted one, that it's not grand ideals versus grand cynicism. It's sort of, as you say, it is a simple-minded, single-minded desire to find sister without being particularly wedded to ideology. You then still have to do something with that, again, sort of within the span of this show. It's whether then they have the sort of the understanding of subtlety for his character to make that seem fuller than it is, to actually make that seem full for an entire 12 episode run. I agree that's a great premise for his character. It's whether or not that premise can actually translate into character itself. I mean, like how we've seen other shows which have got premises for characters at the moment, which have just decided that the premise is enough and they don't actually have to do any character work. Not looking at Galadriel at all when I'm saying that, but but again, it is intriguing. It's nice to actually be sort of intrigued in a way that it's not, I wonder what new horrors this show will give me next week. It is nice to actually be able to say, oh, it could be good. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, we've got
plenty next
of that.
week. Next week's going to be interesting because aren't they doing the episodes in like groups of 3? They're designed to.
Are they?
Wrap up.
Really? Okay.
Really?
I'm sure someone said something about groups of 3. Like either it's directors are doing groups of 3 or something, or they think of each 3 as like a new arc. Because they were speaking about how they were going to handle the year system, because I think it's supposed to be over 5 years.
I thought that was
season 2.
I thought that was the series in total was going to be over 5 years, not just the season. Yeah.
Yeah, but they've like planned it out so that each year is going to be so many episodes. Maybe I was reading about season 2. But
I'm not sure. I'm really
if
not
they
sure.
do that wave format, you could get into the issue where each person thinks that, well, I could just start slowly and just waste 2 episodes and then have everything in the third one, which could get a bit.
Does anyone here even care by the time that like the effort they're going to put in to try and make it so the final episode of this series leads into Rogue One? It's going to be like, okay, that's fine. Like,
I would rather just keep that distance between this and Rogue One. Like, I would happily have this show finish a couple of years before the events of Rogue One. No problem, because excuse me. Yeah, like I'd almost not like to be reminded of where it's all leading, if you know what I mean. Like, I'd rather just see this as its own thing.
Yeah, and they do have this tendency that they're not comfortable with gaps, I don't think. I mean, it's partly because this is the most easily like monetizable era in Star Wars history. So, of course, there are many. If there is a gap, they will try and fill it because it's an opportunity to bring back like the iconic names, the iconic places, the iconic, the iconography generally. But I'm actually also not sure that they're comfortable with gaps narratively. I don't think they understand that leaving certain areas of history up to the audience's imagination or even their memory of the old expanded universe stuff is probably better than even trying to plug that gap on screen. You don't need to see every join in every part of the story throughout the sort of immediate lead up to, and then the after the Battle of Yavin. There was no need for an Obi-Wan Kenobi story, for example. I think you could have done it better. Well, anyone could have done it better than they did it. I just don't think you needed to do it to begin with. That's one of those gaps that's probably best left to the imagination. And so if you get talking about, whether they will tie Andor in with Rogue One itself, I wouldn't be surprised if they did try and tie it directly in. But I think, as you say, it might actually be a flaw if they were to try that, because it's not a good thing.
I've looked it up. It says season 2 each year will be 3 episodes, and then it moves on to the next year.
Okay.
So they're going to do 4 years for season 2.
Whoa! Wait, sorry. So season 1, how much does that span in terms of timeline?
I have no idea. I don't know what the current year is.
I thought you. Sorry, because maybe I misunderstood. I thought you were saying that every 3 episodes they skip a year or something.
That season 2 will cover 4 years. Every 3 episodes skips a year. I'm not sure about this one.
Oh my god. Okay.
Because I thought it was this one, but I must have read for season 2 and got mixed up.
I can't shit on it as an idea, because House of the Dragon has been skipping several years per episode, which has been an insane idea, but I feel like they've managed to actually make that work. So I'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, a year isn't that big a time jump, and it allows you to keep skipping to like
interesting things.
points.
Yeah, we've been given, especially after episode 3, we've been given a lot of climactic events that we can skip some time now and see what the repercussions of that are. Like Security Man, where will he end up? Will he be hardened, or will he be questioning his I don't know, his he having an existential crisis to some degree, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, and you'll actually get to see, because that way you can have it build up where you can see the key moments that make his decision, but then also see the outcome of the decision and how it gets worse and sort of where he ends up, kind of thing. So I kind of like that stuff. But I like anthology things.
I'll give it a shot for sure. I mean, this is the thing. This show, I'm fine with it. I give it a thumbs up. I'm okay with it. It's not like the others to me, and even the way it's shot, the way it looks, it doesn't feel at all like it's this as producty.
Well, they didn't
you, man,
build
the
like a
others
4-block wide city, essentially. The entire thing is a massive practical set, as opposed to doing the massive surrounding screen thing they've been using for every other production.
One
the
street
screen.
in Tatooine that they had for like every
the one street
fucking
Tatooine,
show.
and then the MDF town on the not Tatooine place as well. That was
the
impressive.
only
The thing I keep coming back to, right, is like, remember the fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader the first time, right? And it was just on this flat sound stage with nothing interesting going on, just the two of them facing off across like a sandy flat expanse. The most boring shit imaginable. Then think about that episode 3 gunfight where it's like, you're in this big industrial facility where there's shit falling down off the ceiling, and it's all very kinetic. Like, characters move in like intelligent ways. They take cover. They try to outflank people. Imagine if that level of effort had gone into Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, how much better it would have been. Like, that's the difference.
It's almost baffling to think, isn't it? Because like, they must have had a different idea and approach back when they were first thinking of getting into the streaming game. Because I'm pretty sure Andor was like the first proper project that they were going with, and then it got like delayed several times and loads more money, probably reshoots, whatever. Meanwhile, they came up with their new strategy, because I'm pretty sure the volume stuff plus the format, it's like a famous format at this point. There's 6-episode format where like episode 5 is always a huge revelation. Moon Knight has this, She-Hulk, Falcon the Winter Soldier, Kenobi, Boba Fett, and Mando season 2. I think Mando season 1 is a little bit more unique, but I saw someone like connect all this. They've clearly got a unified vision about how you make a TV show and how you make it successful. Andor isn't following it. There's like a mandate of 2 big old fun action scenes per episode for a lot of these shows. Andor I basically said no. We're going to have 2 episodes where people are just talking to each other, which again is not for a lot of people, and not a lot of people's speed. People are not fucking, they want more to be gotten out of it for a lot of people. But hopefully, I think that they were intending that it would work as a foundation to make episode 3 hit harder. And that is enough for me to be like, I want to see what else you're up to, show. It seems like you're unshackled by Disney's bullshit, or at least recent Disney bullshit. They're still shackled, obviously.
Yeah, but, there's kind of a meta problem with that. Having that formulaic approach to story, where your desire isn't actually to tell story, it's just to hit the right note in the right place to elicit people's mere interest, like the most superficial interest, as opposed to investment in the story. The problem, it's becomes self-fulfilling, because no one's really satisfied by the stories being told using that formula. But because the formula is now ubiquitous, whenever you see a show which doesn't follow it, or which is slower, which doesn't give you that sort of that mandated action sequence every few minutes, people lose interest, or they feel the absence of it, because the show isn't simply trying to press their buttons at the right time, in the right place, in the right moment. And then if people get used to that, even if they're not satisfied by the shows that utilize that device, they will be less satisfied, or there's a risk of making them less satisfied, or more bored, or at least more perplexed by any show which doesn't follow that. So I like that Andor isn't following that so far. I think it would be great if more shows didn't follow that so far, but it might be that some people are already turned off from Andor by the fact it hasn't been following that so far. In which case, like, Disney does more like meta damage to storytelling than just telling shit stories.
I think this is the problem though, in that if you want a mature show that's theoretically designed for adults, then you're going to have a trade-off there, where it requires that extra level of attention and perhaps a little bit more effort to get into it than what you get with that, like, wham bam thank you ma'am, approach with other shows where there's explosions every 2 minutes, and like you say, there has to be those mandated action scenes, and it's really simplistic storytelling and nothing's too demanding. But man, I know which one I'd rather have. I'd rather take the show that requires that little bit more effort to get into, but ultimately is far more rewarding further down the line. I just hope that I hope they're able to maintain that. I hope this isn't just a bait and switch with Andor.
And what a shame that sorry, just really quick, that because of what they were just talking about, the approach was given to Andor for this as opposed to Kenobi. It would be nice if we'd switched them, and a human being made Kenobi, and Andor could have been wasted on some weird soundstage. You know what I mean?
Well, I think when you're trying to go like, well, we need this point in episode 5, we need this point in episode 3 specifically. It's like I think the intention of what you're trying to do shines through into your work. So you immediately start thinking of, how can I get to this place, rather than what would this character do in this scenario. And so that's why you end up with characters who just seem to be wandering around doing actions that don't make any sense and don't fit into any character in particular, which makes everything fall apart. Rather than putting a character in a position and then thinking from their personality and from their point of view, what decisions would they make next. And I think you end up on an entirely different story. And I'm not a writer, but to me, that makes it seem like your story could actually go in a direction that you don't really think about, because you're doing what the character wants rather than what the character would, rather than what you want them to do.
If you're an honest writer, because there is times when this happens where you're trying to make a scene happen because you need the plot to do a certain thing, and like you're ultimately trying to make characters do things that are totally out of character for them, and you just get that inkling of like, this feels like it's not working. I can't quite put my finger on it, but this scene just feels wrong. And then if you take a step back to investigate it, it's usually the characters are acting out of sorts because I'm trying to bend them around the plot. In which case, you need to rework it, and it might be that, like you say, you end up going in a slightly different direction, but you get a more satisfying scene or a better developed plot as a result of it all, because the characters are at least staying consistent with what you've established about them. But that's the kind of writing that takes a little bit more time and effort, because it means going back and changing things to make it fit better and stay consistent. It feels with something like Kenobi or with Boba Fett, none of that mattered. It was like all about getting it done to time scale and just delivering something to a schedule. And that's all it is. That's why they're so shit, because none of the characters are themselves. They're just doing whatever the plot needs them to do to make things happen.
Yeah, it's they were embarrassing. They were like almost not even TV shows. They were just
speaking of things which are barely even considered TV shows.
No,
She-Hulk. I kid you not, man. Like I'm sure you've all watched it and you were kind of up to date, but like episode 5, is it, or 6? The
5
most
is the
recent
copyright one. 6 is the new one. Yeah,
the wedding one.
the wedding one.
That triggered some kind of existential crisis in me. Like, if you torture someone really hard, and I have, and they'll kind of have like almost like an outer body experience, like their nervous system and their mind can't take it anymore, and they just kind of remove themselves from what they're experiencing. I feel like that's what I went through with this show, and like eventually jumped back into my body at the end, and I was like, holy shit, this was actually a TV show. Like, I'm watching a show. This isn't torture. This isn't some kind of purgatory that I've been condemned to. This is a show that people made, for entertainment. How was this allowed to happen? I mean, this is practically a war crime. This show is genuinely one of the worst things I've ever seen on TV, and it cost millions.
Yeah,
I think this is someone's personal blog in visual form. Like, actually, like,
Yeah.
everyone, you know, when you're like, everyone will relate to this, and everyone's like, no, that's just
No,
you.
nobody does.
That's what this show is.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, episode 6 was the one where I was thinking to myself, like, I'm so tired of learning about how shitty these writers are, not just in terms of their talent, but their values. Like, I'm bored of knowing exactly what you think should and shouldn't happen in the world, because it's your point of view is so limited and childish, and just it's like, oh, wouldn't it suck if you went to a wedding and then they're like, can you clean up the dishes? Oh, that's so mean. Poor Jen. It's like, is this for like babies? Like, who wrote? Like, why? It was so childish. This episode, I was having
The whole
trouble with
show
it.
is this show was written by people who are either retarded or they just have the mindset of children, and it's I don't know what even to compare it to. It's like if they said to us right now, we're going to start shooting in 10 minutes, like, just give us a show, just make something happen, and we had 10 minutes to come up with a show with events happening in it. That's the level of like stupidity that's involved here. Like, this episode is just a pointless diversion into nothing. So, you know, the main character, she goes to a wedding of her friend, and she shows up as the Hulk, and her friend's jealous, and then she shows up as herself, in clothes that somehow still fit, even though that they were designed for the Hulk, who's like 3 feet taller than her. Then Titania shows up, and they have a fight, and then like she gets drunk, and then the episode ends. I'm like, why is this? You know, the money that was invested in this one episode, you probably could have made a couple of like small scale, cheap indie movies that probably would have been a million times better, a million times more interesting and creative than this. And that's the thing that pisses me off most, the money and resources that were wasted on this shite that nobody is ever going to find entertaining. I am baffled by it.
It's staggeringly bad, but I think the other sort of particularly irritating thing about it, I think, is the cost in time as well. So episodes 1 and 2, which were awful, were at least awful in ways that you didn't really expect. And so there was something to comment on in episodes 1 and 2. It's like, how the hell did they think this was a good idea? Why have they let the HR department write a show? That's not how this works. Episodes 3 through 6 is almost more offensive because I've watched them all, and if you ask me to tell you what happened in episode 4 now, I couldn't. If you asked me to, so I only watched episode 5 earlier today. Ask me to tell you what happens in that, I could probably, there's a court scene, I think, maybe. That's it. There's nothing actually filling the time. There's no reason for it to be. It's not telling a story. It's not funny, so it's not a comedy. It's not a sketch show. It's not even a variety show because there's no variety in it. And you know, if it had just been, say, 3 episodes long as a skit, you could at least comment on that. You could say either it's succeeded or it's failed based on a principle and a purpose that you've known, that you've identified, that's quite clearly there. But it keeps going on, and it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And it's like there's no reason for any of this. It's not even failing to achieve a point because there isn't a point for it to miss. It's just a thing that just goes and goes and goes. I don't understand why they why is it even this long? Why are there so many episodes? What was the purpose behind giving them, however, like, is it 10 episodes again?
Oh Christ! It's not 10, is it? I
have a feeling
I thought it was 8. I thought we were almost
8?
at the end.
I think it's 9.
It is 9. Yeah,
It's 9. Yeah.
9.
Split the difference.
There you go. We're like 2/3 of the way through. It's just
it's
and the
punishment.
Thing, 3 more episodes. It's weird. I sit there and I watch it, and it is like 10 minutes is as long as 10 days. Every time just seems to stop. And I keep looking back and looking away. I think it must be over soon. I'm going to get distracted. I'm going to procrastinate. I'm going to look at something else. I look back and only 30 seconds has passed. And it feels like so much longer than that.
Well, like, to give an example, it's like, hey, here's a setup. Mr. Immortal. he kills himself whenever he finds his relationships have gotten too difficult, and now he's being sued because of all the different people he's screwed over by not actually being dead because he recovers. It's like, what? Why?
Oh, but when those lawyers were just screaming at him in the lawyer's office, I don't blame him for jumping out that window.
Yeah, I would.
Oh yeah,
I love the fact that like windows in high-rise buildings, like they don't have toughened safety glass like you actually would get to stop this happening. You can just walk right through it; it's no problem. But yeah, it's the writers weren't lying when they said we don't know how to write court scenes and we don't understand legal stuff. And yeah, like they just have lawyers hashing out details, like the bit where they have to try and reach a settlement with all these clients who are suing him, and they literally just go, well, he's got shares in Apple, so we're going to dole that out amongst you. Case closed, we're out of here. Well, it's like, you don't do it like that. You can't, I'm not a lawyer, but even I know you can't just decide it's over.
By the end, one of them didn't even get any money. She got an apology, and he looked her in the eyes for 15 seconds. It's like
eye contact. Yeah.
Completely unreal. That's never gonna. Oh yeah, I don't want those millions. If you could just say sorry to me, that's what I really want.
Yeah.
It's all like the perception. Oh no, when people divorce, they're not actually after the money. They don't bother about that. What all they want is closure. Like this entire thing is written from her perspective, but what she wants. Like the guys that approach her are simultaneously, like the guy that did it today. He's so beta that his first words were to, "I'm sorry, I'm really awkward and I don't know how to approach you." But then he's confident enough to approach her in the first place and give her compliments, but he's still a bit incompetent enough so that she's more competent in things than he is. It's like, that person doesn't exist, but that's what we created in the first one. The other guy was like some kind of alpha guy that read feminist literature.
When she's talking to him and she's like, I just want people to know that I've got an amazing life. I want them to envy me because of my awesome job and the fact that I'm a superhero. And I just thought, you fucking narcissistic, self-absorbed arsehole. That is literally all you care about, because that's all your writers care about. It's like just hollow praise for your fucking career and your glamorous lifestyle that no one gives a shit about. That's
tired of these writers. Like that's what I was referring to, because I'm pretty sure after she says all that, he's like, "You are amazing." It's like, oh my god, he's a unicorn. The writer wrote in because that's who they want. A perfect man to just tell them everything that they know to be true, which is that they're amazing and beautiful and wonderful and the best person ever. It's like, what is wrong with you? Like,
this is just crazy cat ladies having a therapy session with other people's money.
I can just the writers. I can imagine the writers, unironically liking fulfillment posts on LinkedIn and drinking prosecco. Like there's a certain type of person who, and it is by and large, it is sort of affluent, upper middle class, metropolitan, single professional women disproportionately, who they just like it's all everyone has to clap at every superficial achievement. There's a clap on the back, clap for your achievement, clap, you are really beautiful, you're stunning, you're brave, you're strong. And it sort of feeds through into the interactions as well, because the interactions have that sort of complete superficiality and that real shallowness, which is just sort of people with plastered on smiles giving each other compliments in the office. You can just the writers who shine through this show are basically everything wrong with humanity, and I would happily just see them expunged, metaphorically, obviously.
Well, she hasn't. Look at shows like Veep, for example, where everyone fucking hates each other, but like they've all got amazing insults and amazing banter for each other. Like it's all about like them attacking each other, but they don't need praise because they got enough confidence in like who they are to like take that kind of stuff on the chin.
It's weird. Like Veep is almost, it's supposed to be sort of parodic, but actually in parodying the character of sort of the female vice president, it creates so much more real and believable characters than this show does. I mean, Selena Meyer in Veep is so well realized because actually there are a lot of people in the real world who are that low and that self-centered and that mean and bitchy. It's realistic, and it's realistic because it sort of depicts flaws and makes flaws funny. And this is supposed to be a comedy as well. It's been written by a different species of person. You can't even compare Veep and She-Hulk. Just they're two American comedies with female leads, and you wouldn't even guess that they were that similar to each other if you put them side by side.
But I think you're witnessing here, it's like the blog of someone with imposter syndrome. She like wants to be told about how amazing she is, but she didn't earn any of it. Even her job she got because she's She-Hulk. And she spent the last 5 episodes telling us, I don't want to be She-Hulk. I want to be me. I want to be Jen. I want you to be appreciated for Jen. Then she's always willing to use She-Hulk to get whatever she wants, whether it to be to swipe profile or in this, when she wants everyone to say how amazing she is. Yeah, I just want to be She-Hulk again all of a sudden. Very happy to use what she's got for like unearned advantages, but still wants all the praise that she doesn't actually deserve.
I could somewhat live with this if this was part of a cohesive character arc where, you know, her arc is like she starts to become a little bit intoxicated by the power of being She-Hulk, you know, like, oh, it can get me amazing jobs. I'm suddenly incredibly physically strong. You know, I'm attractive to people. Oh, it's all very like enticing, and I want to just be like this all the time, and I'm going to take advantage of people, and suddenly I'm going to start, you know, having less respect for people, less regard for other people's needs and you know, boundaries and stuff, and it's all going to go to my head, this power trip that I'm on. But I know they won't do that. You know what I mean? Like that would be part of an interesting character arc if she learned something from that and said, well, you know, I need to learn how to, well, have great responsibility that comes with this great power, to paraphrase. But like she'll not have that realization because the writers aren't smart enough to realize that that's the kind of character arc you need to go for here. It's just going to be vacuous, ridiculous, you know, justification for their own lives. It's a coping session, it's a therapy session for them to make them feel better about themselves.
It is, and again, because the writers have never gone on an arc themselves, so they don't really know what one of those is. But I mean, I'm still blown away by it. Was episode 4 where, and this disconnect between portrayal of societal ill and character development, where, you know, the moral message. I think it's episode 4. The moral message is, isn't it really so terrible that men generally, or society generally, judges women by appearances and discards them when they don't like their appearance? And to prove this point, they have Jennifer Walters literally commit like entrapment and date rape. But the problem in this episode is the problem is the male gaze again. The problem is just flippant discarding of women for appearances. Yeah, it's so unbelievably tone deaf. I think that's the only genuinely funny thing about it, is it's so unintentionally comedically tone deaf.
But would Jen wants that praise as well? Like when she goes to the wedding and she's in like She-Hulk form, and you know she's getting all this praise, like, wow, you've worked out, and like your ass looks amazing, despite the fact that she never actually turns ass onto them, so they can't actually see her ass at that point. But anyway, like, and she's lapping up this praise, but it's like you're trying to break away from this idea that a person is defined by how physically attractive they are, but at the same time, you've got your main character who just desperately wants that. Like, they want to be lusted after. They want to be desired and envied. They want to be envied for how successful and how beautiful they are.
Because this isn't an arc. This is literally someone's own self-insert and their own opinions. So they think that she's doing the right thing. They don't think she needs to go on an arc because everyone else in the world is wrong.
It's wrong
and
about her.
They need to actually conform to what she wants and provide her what she needs all the time. So they have to go and say she's amazing. And if they don't, it's their fault.
It's going to be what we keep getting with the really, really shittily written new, and they're often female heroes, because all the newer heroes have been female, I think, disproportionately, significantly. They're doing these new kinds of origin stories where instead of them having a flaw they have to work at while simultaneously gaining more power and understanding themselves better, they realize they were really good all along. And
yeah. I've said this so many times, like, it's just an absolute fucking trope at this point. It's like the world that needs to learn from them about how great they are.
You know, your sort of pitch, I think they're going to do a corrupted version of that, where by the end she's going to want to be She-Hulk more than Jen, but she will either learn or be told that what's valuable about She-Hulk is Jen. Like, that is it'll be something like that. Like, why do people like She-Hulk? Yeah, you could say it's the muscles or the body type or even the hair, but really, Jen, it's the person beneath. It's the heart of She-Hulk, and that's you. It's you, Jen. You are She-Hulk. She-Hulk is you. There is no.
We are the Flash Barry.
And yeah, I think that basically that's what we're gonna get. She's gonna spend the whole season to learn she was always awesome. It was never a problem.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, she's not she keeps telling everyone about how, I'm doing really well. I want everyone to tell me I'm amazing. I'm great. But she's miserable. She spends her entire life working. When that woman said everyone's got an arse, that I thought that was the best line of any episode they even got, just to like slap her down. But she spends all of her life working. She doesn't really have anything. Even if she doesn't even like visiting her family. She's got like one friend and spends most of her life drinking. It seems like that's her only hobby outside work. And
imagine that, Disparu.
But she seems really unhappy. But when anyone's like, do you want to do this? Do you want to go out and save people? Do you want to go to save the world? Do you want to contribute to the world and make the world a better place? She's like, no, I want to be a lawyer. But being a lawyer is making you miserable. And it's like, you'd think someone who had a miserable life that they weren't happy in would change things about it. But she doesn't seem to want to.
Well, you'd think a
Must, like,
competent
double down on
writer,
everything.
a competent writer would have understood that and made that sort of the point of the thing. Like the realization that it's not just the point. She-Hulk is great because it's Jen that's inside it. The point of it is no, She-Hulk is great because all the things that Jen thought she valued, all of this massive superficiality, the careerism, the sort of the typical single woman professionalism, all of that is actually deeply unfulfilling. And so part of the realization of the character arc, which you can still do as part of a comedy, would be that, no, actually, I can make a real significant contribution to the world as a hero. And that entails a sacrifice of what I thought my values and ideals were, but also a recognition that those values and ideals were not as high as I thought that they were. Like there is a higher goal in life than simply self-fulfillment and professional fulfillment. You could do that even in this show, and you could even make it a comedy and it would be fine. But nah, because...
I don't think the writers would have the balls to do that, because the amount of flack that they would open themselves up to by suggesting that like being a single-minded, career-driven woman who just lives alone in a glamorous apartment with some cats and is all about her job and just drinks herself to sleep every night, like to suggest that that's not a fulfilling life, you couldn't do it. I honestly think that would be unacceptable. And it would open them up to too much criticism. They wouldn't have the balls to make that kind of moral choice.
Well, this whole episode was anti-marriage from the start. And it was weird because it was like they humiliated the person getting the divorce and then kind of showed the positive of the divorce, that like, yeah, you can get a load of stuff out of this if you divorce people. So I didn't like the messages of this episode at all. Because even the person getting married, she started off and it's like, yeah, I'm really happy, but I just don't want you to do this because it's my kind of day. But there was a very weird scene at the end that I still don't understand, where she walks in after the fight and she's like in tears, and suddenly she loves She-Hulk when she's despised it before and said how amazing he is.
I mean,
she's
obviously
drunk
like
and that was
really...
the true feelings.
Yeah, I think she's just really drunk, and like, you know, when you're really like that, you just suddenly love all your friends. Like, you're the best friend I've ever had. Fucking great. I don't know if that's what they were going for there, like whether that was her true feelings or just like that's how you are when you're tipsy, if you know what I mean, like you're just like super chummy with all your mates.
The part that lost me is that she was like getting on sort of with the guy, and then she's like, uh-oh, and then she goes to vomit. Typically speaking, I think if a guy is like trying to chat up a girl and then she runs off to go and vomit just outside of it's not in the toilet, it's literally just outside the room, you'd probably check on it, be like, oh shit, are you okay? But no, he's gone, and instead Titania's here and she punches her.
I thought you were going to say more. That's a deal breaker normally if the girl throws up. It's like, fucking bail, man.
That would come after, right? But you'd be kind enough to be like, are you okay? Like, you know, oh geez, that's awkward that you're vomiting there. But no, he just disappears. Then Titania turns up. But when she punches her, I was like, why isn't she turning into She-Hulk isn't that how that works? Where when your normal form is in danger, the Hulk form takes over?
None of it makes any sense. No, the writers don't care. Why should we? It's
okay.
I have wondered, and I don't know whether this is just me desperately hoping for some kind of plot, but I have wondered if all of the men she's meeting that are nice to her are actually just part of that unit which are trying to, because he keeps trying to get to turn into She-Hulk, and he's like, no, I really love She-Hulk, and like, is that just part of the plan to like get her blood and her DNA and stuff? That's what I've hoped. Like, there's actually something tying all of these episodes together, but
I think you're being wildly optimistic that there's some kind of cohesive arc to this. Like, I think it's more just whatever.
Because even on the swipe dating thing, there was a guy there who was like really interested in her and her abilities, and like, well, can you get damaged by this? Can you get damaged by this? What about this? And it seemed more like an interview than a date. But yeah, maybe I'm just too hopeful.
Yeah, I think that was just men bad kind of thing, and like you're going to meet a lot of creeps in dating apps. Like, what a bind to have like dozens of people trying to date you. Like, what a nightmare.
You know,
Yeah, it's
their fight, by the way. I was like, She-Hulk is so excited to beat up this superpowered lady in the middle of a wedding with all of these innocent people around, to the point where she even gets tossed into some random guy at one point during it. And I was just like, God, there used to be a concern for civilians when fighting people. That was a thing once upon a time. But now, like, She-Hulk's like excited to do you see her first move as she destroys like the concrete everywhere to do some kind of quake to hit Titania? Instead of trying to be like, Titania, we're not fighting here. There's a fucking wedding. You kidding me?
Oh no, she knocks it into the people.
Exactly.
So if anything, it was even worse. But she
What
literally,
is-
she doesn't care about the public at all. Like when she said, "Don't you want to go out and save the world?" No,
God,
I don't care. So
It is fucked, and I'm tired of watching my superheroes not care about civilians. Stop.
I mean,
You're not a hero. You're just an asshole.
Mo, I mean, you're trying to apply any kind of logic or common sense to a show like this. Like this She-Hulk exists outside the bounds of conventional writing and
Oh, they're gonna
conventional
say, like-
entertainment.
I thought you were gonna
This
say
isn't
trash.
even. This isn't even a story in the normal sense. This is just a series of random thoughts that happen in the writer's head, and they just got splurged onto a page and then turned into a script and then filmed. I think that's all it is. And like, I don't think we can even waste our time trying to analyze it, because none of it makes sense. It's just ridiculous garbage.
There will
I actually
almost be
think this is
its
someone's
only
life.
possible saving grace is it comes to an end, and then it sort of exists in its own realm, its own dimension, like the Mirrorverse, and it's just a thing that is self-contained, and we can just pretend never happened because it's irrelevant to everything else that happens, with the exception of obviously needing to watch it to see where the Hulk has left the planet and how. I just have a nasty feeling that given that they've been so offensively bad and irritating until this point, they might end up just saying, and now you get to see She-Hulk in the next mainline MCU film. So you actually have to watch all of this to understand it.
Catch her in the Marvels. Might as well throw her in there. Like,
The Marvels is well, that's just set up to be like a cesspit, though, isn't it? It's like a nuclear waste dump. That's where you put everyone, all the characters that nobody likes. You can just put them all in there, and again, just try and parcel it off as a thing that no one actually has to see.
Can we?
they keep talking about the Avengers. Like in an interview, what is it? Tatiana has said she wanted to be in the Avengers. They've already said she's in the Avengers in this series, so it's what they're angling for.
I was, because I was going to say, like, you're probably going to be about 60 years old by that point, because I was legit shocked when I found out she was like 35. It's like, and it's unfair to criticize someone's appearance, I know, but like, I was genuinely surprised, because those close-up shots you get of her, I was like, you're at least 45 years old, surely. But no, like, I don't know if they aged her up or something for this show to try and make her look dowdy or something, but oh,
I
man.
think they definitely make her look worse, not only to make She-Hulk look better, but to make Titania look better. There was a scene about the whole makeup thing where she walks into Titania, and Titania's got, applied with a trowel, and then she's got nothing, like almost nothing on.
37. I apologize. She's 37 today.
Happy
Yeah.
birthday.
Yeah. Well done, Titania Maslany.
Can we talk
yeah.
about the memes?
Oh, the true memes.
The what do I call it? Like, it's like corporate memes.
Cool.
It drove me nuts when I saw it in The Boys season 2, and it drove me nuts here. I cannot stand a TV show trying to make memes itself. It looks so cringy every time. And
They were
we
just
got a whole-
statements.
Well, I think it's because they're trying to be like non-offensive. Like, they're obviously trying to be edgy, but at the same time not say anything that's so over the line that like they'll actually get in
They don't-
trouble for it.
I would just go as far as saying they don't understand what meme culture is. They don't know how it works. This is an approximation of what they think it is. And then they look at you and they look back at their memes, they look at you and they go, "Isn't that funny?" And you're like, "What is that?"
It's like your granddad trying to do a meme for the first time. He's
Yeah.
got the meme template.
Yeah, I think they literally went to like Meme Generator and made them there because they were all the same thing. But most of it was just true. I did look it up before.
Yeah,
but
because
they
we
did
were
this-
talking about this before we started, didn't we?
Yeah,
It's
they,
like-
they did this before with like the tweaked video that they did about the internet. They mixed like just true statements about stuff we'd already seen in the show with things that nobody was even saying to try and make it all look stupid. And they did the same with this. I think like 3 of them were just statements of fact. And then there was one like, I don't know why anyone's saying that.
I just think it's interesting, like when a show, like and it happened with Ghostbusters 2016 as well. It's like we know how shit we are, and so we're trying to preempt this by like referencing internet culture and like the kind of shit like that people are going to talk about us. It's like, okay, rather than going down this road where you're getting all meta and like, you know, trying to preemptively defend yourself against criticism, how about you just make yourself better so that people don't want to criticize you so much? Like that's generally how you used to make movies. Like,
I mean, I think I said some of the tweets, and I've definitely said some of these memes in my video. So they did recognize what people would say. Like, one of them is literally just guilty of dressing like a man and wants equality but still wants you to pay for dinner. Those are just, like, facts.
True.
Yeah.
I think they showed those things happening, so it's kind of awkward.
I had a friend at university who wrote his I did a weird subject. He wrote his undergrad dissertation on what was it? So post irony in meme culture or something like that. And it's almost impossible to sort of explain what it is, but you sort of you know it when you see it. And these sort of corporate memes are almost that, but and the perfect embodiment of that. It's almost funny because it's so deliberately not funny. It's like having a generic meme template with a picture of She-Hulk, which just says the text is just She-Hulk is a bad show. And you look at that and you think, well, actually, in the sort of the modern art sense, you can read deep meaning and message into how on the nose that is and how that's really fighting against any conception of irony because it's so just there. It's just a thing. It's almost a bold statement of fact, which is funny because it isn't funny. It's just corporate memes are not a thing that I want to take on. Really, I think they should probably be burned very, very quickly, and then everyone should forget that corporations ever tried to make them.
Well, it's like most of the time when they actually get around, because obviously there's a lag in, you know, the production of movies, TV shows, that sort of thing. So whatever memes they try to bring to bear are usually so fucking outdated that like it's ridiculous anyway. Like the one that always came to mind for me was like you know that Bruce Willis movie, like the final movie in that trilogy of like Unbreakable, what was it called, Glass?
Yeah,
where they start referencing Salt Bay, and it's like that was a meme which was like barely relevant maybe 2 years previously, and like but that's how long it took for it to filter its way into the final movie, and like that's what they're working with. It's like it's as if you take like a robot that's like vaguely connected or to human culture or vaguely aware of it and put it up on stage and try to make it do like a stand-up routine. You know, it's so disconnected.
This website they're being posted to, by the way, is called Intelligentsia, and it's obviously like a rip of Reddit, essentially.
Yes.
I was like, it's fun to pause on these moments because somebody on their team wrote this all up without knowing how anything works and then hoped that it would go past fast enough you don't read it. But you got #cancel She-Hulk. She-Hulk needs to be cancelled because she discriminates against anybody who doesn't share her pathetic man-hating worldview. Where is this? like what is she even like? How long has she even been She-Hulk? How long has she even? Do people even know much about her?
That guy that she met at the wedding didn't seem to know who she was.
I don't think anyone at the wedding did, because even the wedding person was like, "Oh, She-Hulk's at my wedding," and like, surely everyone else would know. Because
despite all the news articles about Jennifer Walters, it's like, okay, you know the name. She's been in the news. She's a monster that can turn into a Hulk. Like, surely that would ring a bell.
The most public thing she's done is punch a woman in the face so hard she got knocked out. Why is everyone concluding she hates men in the public arena? You know, like if you pretend you live in this world and you know nothing about Jen Walters or She-Hulk, and you find out on the news she saved a whole bunch of jury members from being killed by some crazy lady by beating her the fuck up. You're like, oh, okay. And then someone else says, God, I hate her man-hating ways. You're like, huh? Where's everyone getting this from?
That was the thing in the Twitter video one they did, episode 3 or something like that. There were comments in that from the internet that were from our internet and didn't make sense within the universe.
This is what I mean. They're not clever. You put it in this world, it doesn't make any sense. If you lived in this world, you've already had female superheroes. So when they're like, oh, you took a guy and made a female superhero, it's like, no, that doesn't make sense in universe because she literally exists. She's not created by a writer. She's there. What do you mean? Like, yeah, like I said, this whole website is about how she hates men and we should hate her for it. But it's like, how could this have happened in universe? She's barely got any public presence. I just don't get why everyone despises her and they're all very certain of her views on stuff when she's like done barely any interviews. Didn't she do like one interview where she was just explaining her? I think they said like her workout regimen. Like, was there man hating involved in that?
It shows an incredible amount of insecurity as well, because so far they focused on Twitter, now Reddit, and then in the previous episode they said, "Oh, I love having Wong on. It's like having Twitter armor for a week." It's like, this really gets to you. Like, the negative people talking about what you do really affects you. And I don't think when you're writing a show you should be thinking, like, you should try and entertain the audience, but you shouldn't be thinking about what people that dislike it will think and try and, you know, counter them and get jibes in on your show. That's no.
It's the terrible stand-up comic who is being booed and heckled and having things thrown at them, and so who turns on the audience. It's the audience's fault that they don't find it funny. It's not the show isn't funny. It's the audience just doesn't appreciate it. So it's the audience's fault.
Well, this is, you know, as well, this is before the reactions to the actual show came out, because obviously this was made months in advance. And so it's like, again, they're preempting the fact that they know it's shit and they know people aren't going to like it. And it's like, wow, fuck you. It's still good. And like, you're an asshole for not liking it. And like, we're just going to like make fun of you for that. And it's so transparent and it just betrays a complete lack of faith in their own work. And I think I mentioned this on Twitter, like the people that I've spoken to, like within Marvel, who've worked on a couple of different shows for them, basically explained like Ms. Marvel was originally supposed to come out now, and She-Hulk was supposed to have come out several months ago when Ms. Marvel did, and they got the initial screenings of She-Hulk and it was so ridiculously awful that they had to go back and like desperately try and reshoot it and re-edit it to cut it into something halfway coherent. And as a result, Ms. Marvel was rushed out to try and compensate for that. That is why I think a lot of the CGI, like with Jen walking around the offices and stuff, is so shit, because it's like a last minute addition to try and recut this show. But it blows my mind that this is the improved version. This is the one that they went back and redid to make it better. Like, I would love to see that initial cut of She-Hulk.
I was going to say, it can't just be me that sees it. Because I know it's like, yeah, it's awful and it's horrible and it does feel disgusting to watch. But I have to say, I was looking forward to this week. Like, I don't know. Things like this get to, it's so bad that I'm just like, I can't wait to rip this thing apart. It's my entertainment.
This is the thing, like, you know, you make some videos, and it might be a controversial take that you've got. And it's like, I'm probably going to get some pushback on this. Like, people might be pissed off, like, that enjoyed this thing.
Publish.
This is like one of those surefire things. Like, you could pretty much do whatever about She-Hulk, and nobody's going to have a problem with it.
I don't know if you guys saw him as well, but there was just the other posts were basically just, how do we kill She-Hulk? How do we swap She-Hulk? How do we get rid of this bitch? 8 reasons she needs to die. It's like, God, you can't even sound like you're in the internet. You just, like, you make this, it's like, oh yes, memes of her being dumb, but then just a serious thread of like, how can we kill her? How can we stop her from being alive? It's like, what happened? What is this site? What is this collection of people? Like, it's so fucking strange.
Because it's people. This is what people who watch MSNBC's idea of 4chan is. So it's like, it's not someone with actual first-hand experience of anything even remotely online. It's just it's normies reacting against internet culture, or their perception of internet culture, which is why it doesn't actually map with very much that's real online. It's just everything about this is just fake and false.
I love this show's perception of men as well, because the only men that are portrayed as acceptable are the ones who are absolutely unthreatening, just lumps of flesh, who are just there to listen to you and feel sympathetic towards you and hear your complaints about things, while also looking insanely like gorgeous and having like bodybuilder physiques, and reading feminist literature when they're just hanging around waiting for you to come back. And I just thought, wow, like, again, the writers are just projecting all of their insecurities and gripes and hang-ups onto this show. Like that's the only kind of version of maleness that they consider acceptable. Like the one that conforms to all of their hang-ups and expectations. And I just, yeah, it's again just an example of like writers who have never actually lived in the real world and dealt with real people.
I don't think they'd even be happy with it. Like, if you take this week's guy, you simultaneously have to be confident enough to approach somebody that you don't know, but be incredibly apologetic about it, admit how awful at it you are, so she can apologize, and then you come back and go, oh no, I'll try better next time, but then just start rampantly complimenting her out of the blue. That guy doesn't exist. And
We need the Dawn. The Dawn needs to be here, and he needs to be super powered so that he's on the sort of level playing field with her, and then they can have a conversation. But again, the show will never do that. Like, you'll never have a strong, confident man who's like dealing with She-Hulk.
I don't think if that guy into this week's episode had approached the writer, she would have been interested at all. Like, it's that kind of thing. It's like, you think you want this, you don't. You don't want somebody that kind of apologetic and incompetent, but you think you do, and so you write it into a story. No. It's nice for a little TV show, but it's not real life.
Is it like the bad boy paradox that they talk about? It's like your brain tells you want one thing, but your body says something completely different. And yeah.
It's like, I want a guy who's also simultaneously confident, but incredibly submissive that I can dominate. It's like, do you?
Yeah. It's an interesting show. I think we'll all have a blast with it when we get to the end, because I'm going to celebrate that we actually made it and didn't die in the process, just from sheer fucking boredom.
Drunk for a week.
I don't know. I feel like I'm powering up each episode. It's like, I don't know. At first, it kind of broke me, but now the same thing happened in Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time started breaking me down till episode 5, and then episode 5, I just kind of gave up and went hell for leather, and by the end, I didn't care. And I think I've gone through the barrier now with She-Hulk.
For me, it feels like climbing a mountain, and like the closer I get to the top, the more exhausted I am, and it's like just getting through those last couple of episodes is going to be an absolute bind. But I got to do it just so I can say I made it. You know, it's a spiritual.
Why did you climb the mountain? Because it was there.
Exactly. Yeah. Why'd you watch She-Hulk? Because it's there.
I said there was once a time when, you know, cultural moments was everybody getting together and being wowed and amazed by how brilliant this phenomenal film or TV show happened to be. And now we've reached the point where cultural moments are everybody sort of cheering that they survived whatever the awful TV show or film that come out happened to be. We've moved from, wow, this is a common property, this is enlightening and innovating, and we can this is brilliant, this is adding to culture, to, well done guys, we survived another week of culture, what's coming next?
And we use the word culture pretty loosely in this case. Like we survived another week of cultural destruction. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at now. Like, we're joined together in our combined hatred of most of these things. Speaking of which, Rings of Power is a show.
Oh god.
Oh, that was what amazed me this week. Like, we started with She-Hulk going to wear a suit, and you're like, nothing can be more boring than that. And then Rings of Power came out, you're like,
yeah.
Well, nothing can. It's like everything's competing to be worse than the episode before. It was a.
If I discovered anything, I found the first 2 Rings of Power super boring and like barely anything happened. But as Little Platoon will be aware, 3 and 4 pissed me off quite a bit. I thought they were really shit, like really shit, more shit than the first 2.
Oh yeah,
I think they've perfected the unlikable character in Galadriel. Like they took a character that was absolutely fantastic in the original trilogy, and just turned her into a complete bitch that I don't care what happens to her. I don't care what she gets put through, because the show's giving me absolutely no reason to like her. And that is a criteria I could apply to a lot of the characters in this show. Like, none of them stir much interest in me. None of these people I care about what they're going through, what they're experiencing, because they're either boring or they're unlikable or they're just idiots. You know, there's not much to latch onto here, and you're also you're hamstrung by this problem of very slow progression of events, where it feels like we're just stuck in a bit of a holding pattern for a lot of these characters, where I don't feel like they go anywhere or particularly do anything. and it's just the writing is fucking terrible.
Yeah, well, it's long periods of nothingness punctuated by brief flashes of utter nonsense. Like it saves all of its events for the last sort of 10 minutes. So you have to sort of sit there and try not to fall asleep for the first 45, 50 minutes. And then you're suddenly bombarded with stuff, payoffs that the show hasn't earned, or massive events that impact character and world building going forward. But they've all been saved for the last 10 minutes of the episode, and there's usually 3 to 5 of them in one go, meaning that by the next time the next episode comes around, you might have ended with a big revelation for not Galadriel, for example. But 2 minutes before that, in the previous episode, there was also a big revelation for, I don't know, just take Durin and Disa, or any of the other slightly less important characters. But you'll have forgotten that because the show just, it's condensed everything. It puts all these things side by side, meaning that the only impression you're left with at the end is whatever the last big revelation happened to be. It detracts from the meaning and the import and the memorability of whatever the preceding revelation was 5 minutes earlier, because it simply isn't as important. And it's not that the show doesn't have content, because the number of revelations they pack into the last 10 minutes of any given episode shows that it does have content. It's just that it hasn't spread it out at all. What it needed to do was to sort of put these things periodically over the course of the entire hour. That would have maybe kept more people's attention. It would also have allowed these developed points to actually have room to grow and to sink into the mind of the audience. And it would have made the show feel much fuller than it actually is. It wouldn't have fixed the show, because the show is just complete garbage in so many other ways. But that would have been one improvement, just to space out relevant information to make sure that all the actual relevant stuff is remembered going into the next one. But that's only one of the many, 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 many issues with this show.
Well, that's the thing with Galadriel is I know there's like, oh, well, maybe she'll go on an arc because she starts this way, but she's got to have an end position that needs to work towards. Like, yeah, but there should be signs that this behavior is bad and you need to change. And that's even if you disregard the fact, she's thousands of years old. So this is how she acted for thousands of years. I'm not going to just suddenly change all of a sudden. Now you've squashed the timescale together. But she actually gets rewarded for bad behavior. And at the start of last episode, they said an elf will never lead this nation and lead this island. And by the end of the episode, they just go, right, we're going to war for an elf. And I was like, yeah, of course he is.
She
I
I think
think
she
it
threatens
was
to kill
also
everyone.
that they could have that scene with the 2 female characters that are really strong, that pass the Bechdel test, where they're not talking about a man. They have to go off and do these world-changing events. That was all in service of that. But yeah, they had interviews with Morwen Clark where she was saying her arc is going to be about learning humility because she's kind of arrogant and stuff. I think that was absolutely added after the fact. They're very much aware that people don't like this character because she's an arsehole. She deals with people that she needs to win over. She needs to win their cooperation instead of being diplomatic, which you would learn to do after being alive for thousands of years. She's a petulant teenager who just stamps her feet and is like, well, why won't you just do what I say? That's not how someone of that stature and that age should act. But that's what the writers can conjure, because that's what they think is strong.
It creates problems for the rest of the world as well, because she's being placed next to characters who are between. I mean, Elrond is something like, I think he's 500 years younger than she is. But all the humans that she's dealing with, who are also much more mature, measured, and well-rounded as characters, they are thousands of years younger than she is. It can't gel this incredibly old and experienced character with the mind and temper of a teenager with much, much younger characters who have not been around half as long or had anything like the same number of experiences, who are much more mature, adult, and well-rounded as characters. The problem the show has is that, I think I've said this in the video I did, and we discussed everything on EFAB yesterday, so we probably mentioned it there as well, is that the show has a point that it wants to convey for every one of its principal characters. So with Nori, the Harford character, the point of her is she is adventurous, and that doesn't gel with the society she's in. But whenever the show has a point with a character, it doesn't trust that the audience will get that point with anything less than at least 6 or 7 repetitive demonstrations of that point. So every single conversation involving Nori has the same argument playing out across 4 episodes. Why are you so adventurous? Blah, blah, blah. The point with Galadriel that I'm sure the show is going for is the pride that comes before the fall, right? So it's almost certainly going to be the case that Halbrand turns out to be Sauron, for example. He is the master manipulator. He is playing her, and he's also the only person that she is in any way coming to trust or get on with, or even open up to slightly. So I'm sure what the point of her character is to make her this self-assured and objectionable, in order that when the one person she's come to kind of like betrays her, then we see the fall that comes after the pride. I think that's what they're going for. I've been stung before, though, by assuming that the writers can do anything even remotely sensible. Assuming that is what they're going for, though, it doesn't excuse the fact that they have made her one-dimensional across the first 4-5 hours of show, that you need to actually have something to invest in order for us to care if she is eventually leveled as a result of her own hubris and Sauron's genius. We don't have that because it's one-dimensional and it's objectionable constantly. 100% she is a bitch, and somehow being a bitch gets her through every conceivable event she could possibly face. Like she turns up at Numenor, she threatens to kill everyone, she gets put in house arrest without any character change whatever. The person who put her in house arrest then gives her an army the next episode, and off they go to Middle-earth. There's no character growth. It goes back to that point about Andor, about having a premise for a character, and the premise for character not being a substitute for character itself. And Galadriel has a premise, they have a point they want to convey, that's it.
I think the problem, like, where you're suggesting they'll go, I reckon will probably be like a retcon in season 2 if they realize that they need to course correct, but I don't think that was ever the plan. Specifically because the way she is acting is getting results, and that so you can only assume that she acts that way because it gets results and has got results for thousands of years. And you have to question the writers at that point of, how can you not realize that this is a horrible character, a horrible person, and this isn't how somebody should act, and no one would like this person if they existed in the world? And they've done the same thing with the Harfoots. They do not realize that the Harfoots are more evil than the orcs right now. The Harfoots will happily leave their friends to die.
Fucking
Meanwhile,
psychopaths.
the orcs care about their dead. They're like, oh, they cry over their dead, so they like put them out of the misery. Harfoots, they'll just leave you alone to suffer. And
but they'll give you an entry in the Book of Remembrance.
Oh yeah, they'll write down your name so they can remember the horrors that they have inflicted upon you and relive it when they come back to the next ceremony. They're disgusting little creatures, but the writers have no idea that that's what they've created. And I'm like, I just the complete lack of self-awareness, and that's why I think with Galadriel, it's like, no, it's not an arc. They think that she's a good character, a strong character, and this is how people should act. Just because. Otherwise, like, they've shown no other kind of moral compass in any other kind of direction, so why would you assume it for her, kind of thing?
She's rough to watch.
Oh, yes.
Every time she has an opportunity to just present to me that she has a brain cell, or she could put aside her own interest in her own fucking existence for 5 seconds, like, she's so far up her own ass. It's absurd. Because I thought that she would never be able to beat She-Hulk. After the first episode of She-Hulk, I was like, oh god, this woman is like hyper arrogant. But no, I feel like Galadriel's kind of beating her out when she was like threatening to kill everybody when she first arrived in Numenor. She was just like, yeah, we got
Plus the
Numenor
price to pay.
by paying the price of blood. Yeah,
this brings me back to what I was saying before, where it's like, literally all you need from these people is just a way out. You know, like, I'm really sorry for landing here. I got shipwrecked. What can you do? I don't want to cause any trouble for you guys. Just want to get back to Middle-earth because I've got some really important stuff I need to deal with. Could you just do me a favor and give me a lift? That's it. It's not that difficult. But it's like she takes the most like awkward path possible, where she just acts. She gets into a dick-waving contest with Queen Muriel, and like, why? What does that accomplish in your grand scheme of objectives? Nothing. It's just to try and make you look superficially strong.
My favorite scene so far is when she went, "There is a tempest in meat prison." Like that, I burst out laughing at that point. That's the only thing I liked about that episode.
That was straight out of like fucking Breaking Bad, where it's like, when a guy gets shot at his door, I'm the one who knocks. Like, yeah, okay, fuck off. You're not badass.
I thought the delivery was so off, and when we were looking at it like piece by piece on the EFAB, there's like a 2-second thing, a gap after she says it, as if the creators were like, we got to give a second there for the audience to recover from how awesome that was. It was like, no, it was just awkward, mate.
I had to recover from something, but it wasn't because it was awesome.
I hate the fact as well that, like, one, Isildur is this just dweeby teenage guy who's like got his head in the clouds, and he can't, like, he he can't focus on anything, and you get those really on the nose lines because he's a white guy who kind of sacrifices his position in the Navy, and then you get like a mixed race dude who comes up to him and is like, well, we don't all have the privilege of like, being born into the right household to just walk into a job like this. I had to earn it, and you fucked it up for me. It's like, oh, what could you possibly be referencing there? And
I still don't know why they got fired. That entire scene.
I don't get it.
No one
That's-
does.
that's
That
the
captain was
problem.
just an absolute dick.
It's not
Because
even.
the captain sees him do the same thing earlier in the same episode. He almost gets someone killed because he's not paying attention. He's just looking at the West Numenor. And so he loses track of the rope, and then someone goes flying, and the captain just walks past at that moment and just says, "The sea is a harsh master," or "There is no harsher master than the sea." Just generic, like, ocean love pap. But then the same thing happens later in that episode, and it's immediately the captain says, "I've seen you do this properly 1,000 times, therefore that must have been deliberate, therefore you and your friends are fired." That's payoff to something that hasn't been built up. I don't understand how he's reached that conclusion.
If it was deliberate for one guy, why fire the rest? And they were trying to save the rope, not let it go. So
They were literally doing their job. Yeah, it's like they should be commended for that. They put themselves at risk to try and stop the
It is
rigging
insane.
from collapsing.
And it's just because those three will end up fighting alongside all the bullshit that's going to be happening. Like, I could see them retroactively being like, Isildur was going alone. It's like, he should have some friends to go with. Let's just get two friends fired along with him.
But this just
Hobbits,
goes back to what I've said before, right? Like when we're talking about this age of Middle Earth, like characters like Isildur and stuff, like the guy who cut the ring from Sauron's hand himself, this mighty warrior of a bygone age. And he's reduced to like a fucking dorky teenager who can't pay attention, like when he's doing sea trials on a warship. It's so mundane now. It's broken down to the most base, shitty level of character writing. Like people like this, titanic figures like this from the history of Middle Earth should not be portrayed in this way. They should be better than that. And this is what this show is all about. It's about deconstructing all of these legendary figures down to just mundane, flawed, weak humans. That's all it comes down to, and it's one of the many reasons I fucking hate this show.
They have a problem with because they have 5 seasons that they have to try and tell this long story over. So I think with Isildur, reducing Isildur from the position we see him in the prologue to the build up to Fellowship to essentially like Sailor Twink it's an unsubtle way of doing something, but I think they did have to do it. I mean, so the story he's going to have to go on will have to see him grow into the man that we see at the beginning of Fellowship, and they do theoretically have 5 seasons to do that. That will encompass the fact that they will have to flee Numenor, presumably when it's destroyed. He will have to go. He will have to fight in Middle Earth. He'll have to grow as a person, and then emerge as the character we see him at the beginning of Fellowship. I don't really mind that they've reduced him in that way. At least I won't mind it if they actually manage to rebuild him again afterwards. And the problem will be that they won't be able to do that because they're incapable of building characters properly. But I'm not sort of in principle opposed to changing his character. I think that that's a stronger argument to make against casting Galadriel as a lead because, again, as we discussed, it's very difficult to do that with a character who is thousands of years old unless you are just going to pretend that she's not thousands of years old. It would have been better, given the show has shown no qualms about creating its own characters anyway, if you have Galadriel as an important character, but a side character or like the quest giver character. She can still do or think much of what she thinks, but she can suborn actions by a new hero who takes her stead, who is in fact younger, who does have room for character growth and progression, and whose sort of tempestuousness makes sense because of their youth and inexperience, and send them on the adventure instead. If you're going to invent characters, you might as well invent characters who fit the story you're telling, rather than cramming established characters into stories they don't belong in.
I think they had two concerns with this one though. One, they wanted a named character that was immediately recognizable to people who just had a vague understanding of Lord of the Rings, and so Galadriel fits the bill. And two, it had to be female because of course it has to be in 2022. And so
why couldn't it have been Shelob then?
Well, exactly. Or yeah,
the story of the giant spider.
But like you could have theoretically made Nori the lead character, or what the fuck's her name, Bronwyn from the Southlands. Because like
they might.
she is a strong female character who has to like rise above the doubts of her people to lead them into some kind of salvation. And that might have made a more interesting story, but like she's not a recognizable character because she was just made up for this show. And so they played the safe option with Galadriel, and as you described, they've kind of written themselves into a corner with that because you're constrained by what you know she's going to become and what she actually is now. She's thousands of years old. And it doesn't work with the behavior that you want to give her this whatever kind of character arc they're going to try and fudge together for her. But this show is a victim of its own. Well, it's kind of made a rod for its own back with choosing these characters for this role.
They could have easily have put her in the exact same position, and where I think they're going to take her, as sort of the connecting part between all of the stories. They could have given her that and not made her what she is. Like, if they'd made her sort of the politician who's very savvy with, like, she's lived for thousands of years, she's met thousands of, like, well, probably, how many people do you meet in thousands of years? Almost like an infinite kind of amount, I guess. But you've met every kind of person, you know how to deal with people, you know how to respond and how to control people and get what you want from them. And they could have made her that kind of political figure and just had her army or her soldiers fight for her. But that wasn't enough. And I think that's why when you get these kind of, they go back, it's one of the reasons I think people love prequels so much, is they get to deconstruct what came before, but then you can insert yourself and your values and your principles into it, which is why they've had to make her an entirely different character than she is. It's like, it doesn't really make sense that if you were this good with a sword that you can just annihilate a troll, that you never use it in any of the later kind of things. But it seems like that's what they saw her as, or they needed her to be. And I don't like that from a showrunner point of view. You putting... If the author's alive, if you take House of the Dragon, the author's alive, and so if you can get their permission to change their work, I'm not going to defend it. It's like their choice, their work, they can do what they want. But when you do that to somebody else's work, it's not on. You shouldn't be doing that. And so they should have... Maybe it wouldn't have worked for the story without having a character changing, but I think it could. And I think you could have kept her as the same character that you see later on as now, and still had to play the exact same role. You just would have needed other people to... You know, she rallies people around her and they fulfill the kind of fighting role while she handles the... places the bit that
Sounds like you just hate women. That's all I'm hearing.
Well, that's definitely a take that many people have had across Twitter.
By the way, Drinker, is it alright if I share something me and Little Platoon and Rags found and bring you? We found this last night. It's during the escape scene, the dramatic escape scene of the slaves. There's this shot here of these guys trying to escape. Why don't you have a little look, see at what everyone's doing?
What the fuck? It's like they're doing
He's
some
just
dance.
like wiggling.
So
Is she even hitting the chain?
No, she's just completely
thumping the
missing over
ground.
and over again.
It's like they've just hit some killer beat that they've just got to like thump it out to. I'm like, oh yeah.
Trigger, direct your eyes to
Wait,
the man who is
the left guy.
he's trying to pull a chain apart with his bare hands.
The left guy is smacking. The left guy is actually hitting someone's arm with that whatever it is, sword or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know what he's like got like a full on knife there, and he's like just hitting a guy's arm with it.
He also
His hand
appears to be like taking a surreptitious look for a cue as well. Like there's a director standing behind the camera, and so he's looking at him, like, right, start hitting it now. Go smack him, do it.
And then you got the guy really far in the back who's just trying to hit, I presume is his chain with a big stick. That's not going to do fuck all.
Just pushing it into the dirt.
God loves a trier, really, and like these are truly they're giving it their best.
Yeah,
it's like he's trying to amputate that guy's hand. Like it's gonna come off. God damn it!
Like there's even a wound where he's hitting, or is that just the end of his sleeve?
I don't even know. It's an embarrassment because these are all extras trying to just look like they're doing something, and legit, I think they said just try and look like you're escaping, and so that guy legit just grabbed the chain with his hands and started wiggling it around and pulling at it. Like I'm doing it, director.
I think we decided yesterday that this show actually makes more sense if you think that these are actually Amazon warehouse workers after a 16-hour shift and that they're trying to get out.
The thing is, they didn't have to get into costume either. That's like the clothes that Amazon.
It's
gave
actually
them.
Rag said it. It's actually documentary footage of a warehouse. That's what we're getting here.
It's the end of their shift, and they're trying to leave, but
Jeff won't let us leave.
by the way, Drinker, is it possible I can mention my cuddly little version of myself? It's literally got 40 minutes before it's actually gone forever.
You can, yeah. I thought when you first brought that up just a few seconds ago, I thought that's what you were going to actually mention. But yeah,
No, I thought you'd find that hilarious, so I had to make sure you saw that.
it was hilarious. It truly was. I thought you had a video there you were going to share as well. But
No. Well, I'm assuming if the link can get some way get posted into the chat in case people want to use it. But yeah, I don't know how it lined up this way. But oh wait, yeah, sorry. I don't know how it happened, but like it's literally about to end. The you know how long these campaigns go for, but it's lined up exactly with an open bar stream. I don't know who set this up. This is crazy.
What are the odds?
But yeah, there's 40 minutes left. So if anybody in the chat you were looking to grab this thing, it's gone forever after 40 minutes. So you got to get in there, press the buttons.
There you go. Click on this link. Okay. So it's Mauler's 2.0 plushie. This is your last chance to get it, okay? Once it's gone, it's gone. So you've got like literally an hour left before it's all gone.
Yeah, and if you want to grab Fringy's one with it, you get 10% off the both of them. He's quite cute. He's got a little goo vial, which I think everybody likes to have one of them, just in case you fight demons or whatever. I don't actually know what it's used for, but like I can't imagine that it wouldn't be that bad to throw it at a demon of some kind. That, by the way, I
throw everything if a demon meets you.
Someone earlier mentioned like the episode 4 or something about She-Hulk wasn't as impactful to them here or something. I was just going to say like episode 4 was the one I hated the most because they introduced the idea that a sling ring could just end the world at any moment by opening a portal to a demon dimension and having an army fly in. I lost my fucking mind with that shit.
And don't worry though. After you've spent like 5 hours deconstructing, like, you know, Doctor Strange 2 with all the magic systems, the sling rings and everything. It's like now this shit just gets thrown in willy-nilly.
And Wong, because they are correct, by the way, that he gets thrown in and people are like, ooh, yay. But like if you keep throwing him in, he's a clown every single time. He's a fugitive right now of America.
It's just... And he was in court.
And he was in court.
Benedict Wong is too good for this show. He was too good for Doctor Strange 2 as well. Like he shouldn't have been there. Just leave him alone. Let him have his own show.
Yeah. Fuck it. Call it Wong. We'd watch it and be sad because it'll probably be bad.
See, that's when I turned off him as a character in Doctor Strange 2. And I've put this in because I despise it. Whereas like this is the thing that will destroy the multiverse. I'm just like, yeah, but I'll attack your friends. Okay, I'll just help you and do anything you want. It's like no. A good person would be like, well, there's nothing I can do. So like the multiverse is far more important with the almost infinite amount of lives than 2 people over there.
Oh, Disparate Dudes is even worse because Wanda doesn't know about Mount whatever it's called, when to call. She doesn't know about it. So all he had to say was, no, that's it, bitch. That's the book. You destroyed it. That's it.
Yeah.
But no, he says, I'm not going to tell you the information I have. It's like, oh, you fucking idiot.
I'm not going to give away the super secret information that would totally scupper all of our plans and help you. Nope. You're not going to get that out of me.
She gives him a literal sling ring. He can open a portal to anywhere. And he's like, I will open it to the place where you need to go to end the world. It's like, wrong.
Yeah. That's why when he said to She-Hulk, I'm like, no, I already don't like you. I'm not.
I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but this is the problem I have. But this is the problem I have with magic systems in movies like this, where it's like the bit where Doctor Strange turns like water into wine, literally in someone's cup. It's like, well, okay, why can't you turn someone's brain into bleach or something then if you wanted to kill them? Or like, why couldn't you use the sling ring to open a portal inside Thanos?
You're taking it too seriously, Drinker. Like, it's meant for children. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's just...
I'm like, oh, okay.
So we don't think children have, like, brains and logic?
Exactly. Children are retarded. Let them be retarded.
Yeah. Is there not an interview with like one of the cast members where they straight up say like, well, we have to keep introducing new spells because they have to look cool and keep things interesting. And
He
it's
says that, and they show the footage, and yeah, that's why they never use the same spell twice. They have to keep using new ones to be cool. So that demon ghostly cat head thing, that's someone was just like, that's new, fuck it. It's like, what? Why would?
yeah.
Hey, it's still not as bad as She-Hulk, where they spend like what is it, 3 minutes or something getting people into a hole, and then he just, I can turn this to suck. It's a vacuum now. It's like, why don't you do that in the plot?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a kind of vacuum that doesn't suck any of the people, just the demons.
Oh yeah,
Like,
just the
wow,
evil
that's-
people. Yeah.
That's super useful,
Special.
Wog.
Special vacuum. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to like just touch upon before we do a bit of super chatting was House of the Dragon, which has been surprisingly good. I think we probably would all agree it's been relatively solid so far, and like
It's the one
actually
I
got our
can't
interest.
contribute to. I saw the first two, and I'm like, I can't carry on with this. I'm in a weird place where I absolutely love Matt Smith. I love all his scenes. I love everything in. I would adore a series with him as sort of from his perspective, because I think he kind of raises all the other characters. Even the king. When I think of the king scenes that I like, it's with him. But then after 2 episodes, because he wasn't really in much. Now I have heard it had improved a lot, but I kind of went to the position of I'm going to wait till the end of the series and see what other people think, and then depending on their result, I'm going to go back to it.
I think
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, like, unless it takes a massive dip in quality, then it's probably going to be worth your time watching. The big criticism, I guess, I've got of it is that as much as it's intriguing from a political point of view, and like the kind of core intrigues and stuff are pretty good, you know, and there's some decent action sequences as well. And the acting is obviously really good because you've got a pretty talented cast there. The issue I have with it is that I don't really care about anyone in this show. Like, none of the characters are particularly interesting or likable. It's more like, I don't know, like they've gone for this level of realism where they're almost like subdued to the point where they're not actually interesting people. Like, none of them I'm looking at and thinking, well, I would really want you to get the Iron Throne as opposed to this person. Whereas in this show, I don't get a real sense that any of them would be particularly good rulers. And I don't know if that's an intentional decision on the part of the showrunners, but like, with Rhaenyra, I guess we're meant to root for her because she's kind of the protagonist of the show, but there's no real indication of like what kind of ruler she would be. Like, do you want to change things? Do you want to improve people's lives? There's nothing like that. Like, from her, all I get is like, I want to be the ruler because it was promised to me and I feel like I'm entitled to it. And
I don't
it's
think
not
she's going to be a
really-
good ruler.
No, and it's like it's not really a strong enough basis to like root for a character. Yeah,
I'm
so,
not even
like,
sure you're supposed to root for. My 3 favorites don't include her. It's Matt Smith's Daemon Targaryen. I love. I think he's fantastic. I'm actually a big fan of the King, Viserys Targaryen. He might be my favorite character. The thing is, the context is awkward here because like I'm assuming almost that you have all of the conversations that I've already had with like Gary and Shad weekly on their channel about all these episodes. We've gone like hyper in depth for all of these different people. So I'm sort of sitting here like, oh, I love loads of the characters, and I think the work has been actually kind of really, really good. Loads of the dialogue I've been super impressed with. House of the Dragon is the runaway best out of the 4 that have come out. I really like it. Not going to recommend it until the season is done, and that I can say that it didn't backstab me, because I'm half expecting that still. But episode 5, for example, was the one that I thought, fuck, I'm enjoying this a lot now. And yeah, we talked for a while about all of the sort of the smaller bits and bobs about the inflections, expressions, and pieces of dialogue that imply different things going forward. All the interpretations of why a character makes a decision. House of the Dragon does not treat you like a baby. A lot of things happen, they don't tell you why, and you have to infer it from different facts you found out from before. I end up watching the episodes twice for the nature of the job I'm trying to run, and I end up picking up lots of extra details that I have lots of appreciation for. Meanwhile, Rings of Power, if I rewatch an episode, I get angrier and angrier because I'm like, oh my god, how did I miss this and this and this and this? it stands in a staunch opposition to Rings of Power. It's amazing how many similarities there are in the production of these two shows and how far away they are from each other in terms of quality.
If I was to ask you though, like taking Game of Thrones like at its peak, you know, when it was genuinely good, how would you rank this compared to it?
I don't think it's as good. Game of Thrones at its peak.
Agree.
I remember thinking Game of Thrones, if it can nail the ending, then this will be my favorite piece of media of all time. It didn't. In case anybody was curious, like, didn't even really nail the middle. If we're being completely honest,
I think yeah, one thing that really stood out for me with Game of Thrones was like there were so many characters that were just fascinating, and you wanted to see more of them all the time. Like in those early seasons, I would love in Tyrion's scenes. You know, like his dialogue was amazing. The performance from Peter Dinklage was great. Like all of that, it just made him a joy to watch on screen. And you just always wanted to see more of him. You wanted to see more of Ned because he was your classic solid hero. You know, he was trying to do the right thing. You know, you wanted to see more of Rob and Arya because again they were like plucky characters who were put into a situation or that they were unprepared for, but you identified with them. You wanted to see more of Dany as well because like it felt like she was unfairly victimized in all of this and she was just a pawn for other people to use. Like all of those things gave you a really strong sense of who those characters were, made them really interesting and sympathetic. I just haven't had that really with anyone in House of the Dragon.
You're not starting. I mean, it's not starting from the same basis. Obviously, I mean, I think I said the same thing when I did the video of it. I'm fairly pleasant. I think I'd say I'm pleasantly surprised by House of the Dragon. But I sort of did the comparison with where the characters begin in the first episode of Game of Thrones and where they go from. Like almost every one of the main characters is either a novice in the sense of being a child, or inexperienced in the sense of having been cast out of their comfort zone. So Ned Stark has to go and experience King's Landing bureaucracy for basically the first time. Jon Snow goes to the north of the Wall, and this allows you to grow into your characters as the characters themselves grow, and it fleshes the world out in a way that's more approachable, I think, for people who don't already know the source material or haven't watched Game of Thrones already, for example. If you're doing that, then what you're seeing the world for the first time just as your characters are. You're experiencing it for the first time just as they are. Those characters are growing. Your experiences through them allow you to inhabit them. But if you compare season 1 of Game of Thrones or even episode 1 of Game of Thrones with episode 1, season 1 of House of the Dragon, in House of the Dragon, you're joining people at least in the beginning, if not at the end of a story. They're all very intimately familiar with the setup, the political dynamic, the city in which they live. A lot of them are literally born to rule. They know each other very, very well. So there's not the same formation of relationships across the first couple of episodes, at least. I know this sort of begins to change. And it makes it, I think, it makes it intriguing, but in a slightly cold and dispassionate way. It's kind of like watching a game of chess as opposed to reading an intriguing story. You're impressed by the machinations, and the dialogue is excellent, as you say, and it treats the audience seriously. But unlike Game of Thrones, it's not really inviting you or even allowing you to care about the pieces on the board.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you can enjoy it on kind of an intellectual level. It just doesn't grip you emotionally. Maybe that'll come later. I'm not sure. The only character I really felt like not even a bond with, but just like an investment in was Paddy Considine's King. You know, because he just felt like quite a sympathetic character. You know, he's a guy who's in over his head. He's not particularly decisive, not particularly strong, but he is still kind of trying to do the right thing, and I think that makes him quite a nice guy that you feel bad for. But yeah, everyone else, I'm just like, I don't particularly care which of you succeeds at this point. And I feel like that's maybe to the show's detriment because like I should be invested in something.
There's a couple of moments where they do care, because another sort of one of the narrative problems it has, I think, if you're trying to actually care about any of the people involved, is that House of the Dragon takes tell, not show, to sort of its logical extreme. Like, so much, especially across the first 3 episodes, is exposition after the fact in council meeting. Like an awful lot of it is. I mean, Game of Thrones did this as well, but not as often. It was like one tool in a much broader arsenal for Game of Thrones. House of the Dragon has this habit of events happen off screen, or you're told about them, and this time skip will actually sort of emphasize this again, I think. All of this important stuff happens, you don't really see any of it. You're informed about it after the fact, and then again, what you're listening to is essentially a kind of pol sci lecture. You're being taught about the politics that have happened. You're not being shown it, and you're not living it with the characters. There've been a couple of moments where it has swapped that approach. So a couple of the scenes with Rhaenyra and Alicent together as friends, for example, when they actually allow themselves to show you relationships forming, proves that the writers can do it. I just think they might have been sort of alarmed by the fact that, they didn't get the second season confirmation until well into this one. I think they were trying to just cram as much in as possible in case they didn't get that second season. And so they're progressing very quickly, and that doesn't leave you time to actually have character scenes in the way that Game of Thrones did. But again, I'm sort of emphasizing the negative. I have been really pleasantly surprised by House of the Dragon, and especially when you compare it to fucking Rings of Power. But there's still something about it which is just like, it's not lovable, as you say.
I think it actually is safe to say that these are a collection of very a lot of them are devious characters. A lot of them have very negative traits. A lot of them, and it's not to say that I know how this ends, but just that things are going to go badly. Like a lot of people's more definitive desires to push whatever they particularly want are really coming out. Meanwhile, I think you're right that Game of Thrones had a lot more of a selection of very pure and very good characters. I would say Alicent Hightower is probably the closest you'll get to what seems to be a character with a decent amount of power who's a very good person. Yeah. The King, of course, I think is very much a good person, but I don't know how long we're going to have him for. Who knows? But then,
if he's not going to be alive at the end of this season, clearly.
But then you start getting to all the others, and like a lot of them are just fucking bastards. But like, I've coming to know what they want and where they're going. Like, I am very invested. I'm very interested to see how this is all going to turn out at this point. Specifically the path, not necessarily the destination.
Just to kind of expand on the point you made there with the Game of Thrones characters, it wasn't even necessarily that like they were definitively good that made me like them. Like with Tyrion, like he wasn't necessarily a good character right off the bat. Like you could tell like he had lots of layers of selfishness and narcissism to him. But it was just the fact that they were very engaging. Like they were given great like vibrant personalities and played by really good actors and given great dialogue to just make you.
Do you not feel that about Daemon?
In the sense that I really like him, like he's a good person.
No, in the sense that he's like a vibrant character. He's got a lot to him, and he's played wonderfully by Matt Damon. Not Matt.
I think he's played brilliantly by Matt Damon. I'd like to have seen him do this.
Yeah,
Matt Smith does give a fantastic performance, and I think maybe it's more that than the fact that he's a really interesting character.
Really?
I think he's got potential to be sure.
God, Shad's gonna kill you. Don't talk to him about this, okay?
He's a bit of a contradiction, is old Damon. Like he doesn't fit very, very neatly into any particular box. And I'm not saying a character has to, but it's just like I don't quite know what I'm grappling with him. In the sense that he's not this like really strategic planner. He's not a schemer. He seems to do a lot of things on a whim. He makes a lot of bad decisions. He badmouths the king. He gets himself exiled from court. He gets embroiled in a war that he can't win. A lot of these like really, bad pieces of decision making that kind of they don't undermine him as such as a character, but they just paint him as a guy who just doesn't really seem to have much of a plan. He just kind of does things that pop into his head at any particular moment. He's impulsive. And yeah, like.
Do you really think? Well, so like what his goal is, right?
Yes.
So, don't you think that a lot of the decisions he makes is facilitating it? It's just the things that he can't necessarily control push it out of the like.
I'm undecided whether it's like he's able to seize opportunities when they appear, or whether it's part of a grand plan. I get the impression, especially early on in like first few episodes, where he actually just makes a lot of bad decisions and ultimately is able to wrestle something good out of it to his advantage. But it's almost like a combination of like daring and circumstances that happen to play into his hand.
I think uniting with the Valarians to rescue the transport ships and stuff, that was a good move on paper in terms of having them as allies, especially when you're splintered as the Targaryens are, and that there's going to be a question of succession. And if you've got the Valarians on your team, that's probably going to help out. But then, of course, the Stepstones, we have issues in that the crab people, or whatever you want to call them, the pirates, they seem to be a little more talented than expected in terms of avoiding the dragons. Now, funnily enough, that's one of the things I take issue with. There's a couple of things I take issue with in the show, writing choices, but I find it very hard to believe that a group of pirates and cave dwellers were able to repel dragons. I don't believe it. They're like, the logic is that whenever the dragons turn up, they hide in their caves and the dragon fire can't quite get to them. It's like, first of all, pretty sure it could. Pretty sure dragon fire being fired into a fucking cave is going to cook them all. But the idea that they run into their caves and then run back out, and how is this winning the fight for them? And we're told it was years this fight's going on. It feels to me the dragons should have won. But okay, it doesn't go as well, and then they have to, construct that sort of trap thing, and then Daemon does actually get what he wants. Yeah, and he gets a huge amount of respect, and he's dubbed the King of the Stepstones, right? And then he gives up the crown to gain favor with his brother.
Yeah, and I think, again, his actions there weren't part of a grand plan. It was almost like he got the letter from his brother saying, like, we're sending help to assist you. And that's what spurs him into action, because he knows if those ships arrive with help, like, that's going to rob him of his glory, and he's not going to be able to take credit for this victory. So it's like he has to make a desperation move to lure these guys out and ultimately kill them. And it speaks to his bravery, I guess, like, in terms of just personal risk that he's willing to take on the battlefield.
Well, there's that, but this is again why I have so much more to compliment about this show compared to the others. It's key to identify, like, he makes that choice after he reads his brother's note, where his brother says, like, I'd hate to see you fail, and he means that in a sincere way. He's trying to help him, but Daemon reads that. He's like, fuck off. I'm not going to fail. I'm not failing. And, it's what... Because there would be criticism of a reckless move by him to do what he does in episode 3, but at the same time, I think it's fully informed by his character. I am quite fascinated by Daemon Targaryen. I find that he is power hungry. He believes he deserves the throne, but at the same time, he wouldn't want to destroy any member of his family because he loves them, and he want to make sure that Targaryens are stronger than anyone. Reflected, of course, when Corlys implies a criticism of Viserys, and then Daemon is like, he's my brother. I'll shit on him. You can't. It's like, all right, fine, jeez. And he's just one guy. The third favorite I have is Otto Hightower. I find him super duper interesting. And I'm not just biased because he played by a Welsh actor. What do you mean? Look at Rings of Power. That didn't help me out, did it?
You Welshies, you all stick together, don't you? Admit it more.
But yeah, I mean, his acting's been fantastic, but also just the role he's been playing, trying desperately to keep pushing the pieces on the board to get his bloodline further closer to the throne, while simultaneously offering a secondary motivation that he sees a civil war that's on the way, and he's doing everything he can to avoid it. His scene in episode 5 I thought was really, really good. And so this is the thing, I'm super interested in your perspective that you're finding it trouble to root for a character. And if your reasoning involved, like, you don't even think that any of these people are really suitable for the throne, I would almost agree with you. I'd be like, yeah, I think that Daemon would be an awful ruler, but I am kind of rooting for Daemon. I am fascinated by this underdog, crazy, chaotic character who wants to get something he probably can't, but at the same time will work his ass off and still loves his family and is played by a fantastic actor. I'm fascinated to see where the story will go and what will happen. And I really enjoy the way they've written the dialogue, again, with the performances. And I think the show looks pretty great. And again, I'm someone who said I'm going to hate this show when it comes out because I still think of Game of Thrones whenever I watch it. But it's been earning my appreciation.
It puts you in an odd situation as a viewer. And, like, I feel like I'm perhaps not doing a great job of explaining my logic on this one. But it's like when you've gone with a show like this where I guess it's trying to do a very realistic depiction of characters as real human beings, like where there's no discernible good guys and bad guys as such. It's just different people with different personalities. And so when I said before, like, there's no particular person that I think it would be amazing in the role and no person that I think would be absolutely terrible. Like, even Daemon potentially could be a good ruler. It's just like I think he would be an authoritarian. Right. Compared to his brother. But when I don't really have a character that I want to see achieve a certain thing, like, I'm not as invested because I'm not really that bothered for what any of them do, if that makes sense. Like, when I see that like they all have this goal of reaching the
Yeah,
Iron Throne, like each person wants to be ruler for various reasons. Either they want power, or they feel like they're owed it, or whatever it is, or it's their responsibility. But if I don't have a clear sort of feeling in myself over like, well, there's one person I really think would be better than the others, or that I want to see succeed, it becomes just more of an intellectual exercise. Like, oh well, what are they going to do this episode? What's the maneuvering going to be? But I don't really care who succeeds over anyone else because I don't have an investment in them.
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like that's a problem for me as an audience member.
Well, I suppose we're watching what is about to be a big old sandcastle crumble the fuck apart. And I can totally understand what you're saying when you're like, I don't even care who ends up on there exactly because I think you're all going to be like really bad rulers. My argument was sort of be like, oh yeah, but we can see that car over there has loads of TNT in it. That one too. That one's 3, and all 3 of them are about to start up their engines and they're about to crash into each other. I'm not necessarily concerned if they can fix these cars once it's all done. I'm looking to see how that crash goes and what all the fire and the shrapnel and how because I'm in the same vein, like, when Ned goes up to find out, he starts inspecting who killed the Hand of the King. When I'm watching Game of Thrones for the first time, I'm thinking, is there going to be a big conspiracy behind this? Like, is who killed the Hand of the King going to actually, and then Robert dies, and events are just happening per episode of House of the Dragon. We've had like sort of events to deal with, like the Stepstone War. Like, how does the king deal with that? What does it say about his relationship with Daemon? How does Otto try and manipulate the situation? Is Rhaenyra's succession going to be put in question again? Blah, 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 blah. Obviously, the latest episode was he's going to propose a marriage between his daughter and the Velaryon son to bind those houses. What does that mean? And like, I don't know if this stuff is compelling to you or you guys in general or not, but like even him turning up and Corlys not greeting him and Corlys sitting on his own throne and making the king walk to him, I found that so meaningful on its own. Just that. It's not even really anything, but I was just like, oh, look how much, look at the power dynamic that's changed between Corlys and the king to this degree. And like Rhaenyra shaking his hand when he arrives and noticing 2 of his fingers have been cut off because of his growing illness, sort of thing. Everyone's awareness of the king dying and everyone always making comments related to it, while Viserys is still trying to rule, still trying to make things better at every turn. But everyone just keeps commenting like, "Oh, do you need to sit down? Oh man, you're looking so good. Oh, you need this, you need that." And I love the scene where Viserys was talking about, will he be remembered as a good king? Will he even be remembered at all? And then his hand is like, maybe it's better to not be remembered than to be remembered because you like killed a whole bunch of people.
You're describing something that's very interesting, and I would agree that House of the Dragon is a very interesting show. But, and I think maybe what the drink was getting as well, is that there's a difference between something being interesting and something being fulfilling. And Game of Thrones was able to do this because Game of Thrones was still, at the time it came about, this sort of unknown commodity. And it was able to use the horrible phrase to subvert expectations. It was able to tease you with the sense of an impending moral fulfillment for a character. Ned Stark is the good guy. There is such a thing as the good guy in this show. Dany is also a good person, at least at the beginning. That's what we see of them. And it was able to give you a moral arc and then to disrupt or to interrupt that or to invert it or to do something surprising with it, which keeps you very interested. But it doesn't do away with this idea that the characters are still on a kind of moral journey themselves. Whereas with House of the Dragon, what you've got is a much more known commodity because we've all seen how Game of Thrones has done these things. You don't have a particular moral journey, I don't think, that any of the characters are going on. There's no sort of prospect of fulfillment. What you know is, and as you put it, is you are setting up a car crash, and it will be interesting to see in what particular manner the car crash happens. It would be interesting forensically to break that down. But if you're just going to keep setting up car crashes in perpetuity, and it's this eternal recurrence of car crash, eventually you're doing a job, but you're not really creating a story with that. You are just forensically examining this anatomy of a disaster on screen. And again, that is interesting. I don't want to come across like it's a complete downer on House of the Dragon, but I think that absence of anything sort of approaching fulfillment on a moral or a character level is kind of the reason that it's not as gripping or engrossing or feelingly done as even Game of Thrones was, or as another story might have been.
I mean, for me, one of the reasons I dropped out of the first 2, but why I like Matt Smith is his character in the first 2. Again, I've only seen those. Had a lot more depth than the others because there were instances with him where a scene looked as if it meant something to him, but he was putting forward a front. So when the baby dies and he's drowning his sorrows away from everyone else, but then he kind of puts on a front for the men to say what he thinks they want, but then everyone else took that at face value, and it led to everyone to think that actually he didn't care about it at all.
Right.
But he also kind of said that he kind of hinted that you don't really appreciate it, but he didn't just come out and say it to other people. And that's kind of where it gets me. Like, I found him interesting, but the others seemed a lot more one-dimensional in the first two. Like, I didn't get that kind of intrigue that I did with other characters that I did with other people. Well, him specifically. And I don't know. To me, a lot of the first two episodes seem to be a load of people talking past each other, trying to sound as if, like, what you could have easily just got what you wanted a far more direct way. It's like, no, we really want to seem like we're doing something more complicated than it actually is. And I don't. When you get to like Lord of the Rings inspired Wheel of Time, then Wheel of Time inspired Game of Thrones, as well as Lord of the Rings, obviously. But it goes back to the Game of Houses from Wheel of Time, and I don't know. I'm just comparing the two, and maybe I think it works better in a book form than this. But maybe it's because I've watched Game of Thrones and so I've seen it before. But I just needed the characters to have more depth, and maybe that comes over time. And so as everything evolved, I'd like it more. But I kind of think if you're starting a series like this, you should start hooking your audience earlier. I don't like these slow start shows just assuming that your people will stay with you.
I wasn't hooked. I think even after episode 2, I was like, "This is fine." It was 3 where I was like, oh, "Okay," and then 4 and 5, I was like, "Ooh, this is getting juicy." I'm like,
Yeah, I've heard similar opinions. It's just I don't know. I think that you should at least start with something that grips people and makes them want to continue watching. So I even think you should like start with an impact and then you can slow down afterwards, rather than starting slow and just assuming that people will stay. Because I actually don't think a lot of people do.
Yeah, like having a Gandalf crashing from space. People will love it. Like,
I mean, I
it
think
doesn't
generally
have to be action. It can be like some.
no,
kind
I
of-
know what you mean. Yeah.
I think, yeah, with this, to some extent, I'm nitpicking in the sense that I think that it's a fundamentally good show, and I'm just like finding little issues with perhaps my investment in the characters. But there's enough good stuff there that I think it will probably build on that over time and get me hooked in. And yeah, like I'm certainly not watching it and dreading each new episode. Like, I'm interested to see where the story goes, and I think that's to the show's credit. Like, it's turned out to be a lot better than I expected it to be.
I think House of Dragon's going to win the TV show fight of these 4. I think it's going to come out the winner. But
It already is, isn't it? Hasn't it got something like its viewing figures are like 25? Is it 25 million an episode now? And it's going up anyway.
I wasn't even talking about that. I just meant, like, critically, I think our spheres will sort of come to an agreement that the worst of these 4 are going to be Rings of Power or She-Hulk. It'll be between those two.
I'm pleased that out of the 4, we've got 2 relatively good ones. Like, we've got a pretty good show in House of the Dragon, and we've got something that's okay in Andor. So.
And it's not coincidental. Both of these are taking the audience seriously. Like, there is a lesson to be learned there. Like, if you're trying to make it approachable by treating your audience as idiots, which Rings of Power is doing, and you're actually putting the audience off because the audience feels like they're being treated as idiots, when you've got mature adult shows that treat your audience seriously in House of the Dragon, sorry, there's a lesson to be learned there. Maybe don't assume that the audience is as thick as the writers are.
Do they have a choice though? That's the problem. Like, write it. People always assume that people are at their level. They're just like, oh, well, if anything,
yeah. When you are thick as shit already, do you have the ability to conceive of people being being smart when you yourself are not? Like, I guess that's the problem. But we do have quite a few super chats. If you gentlemen have got a little bit of time, we could maybe try and answer a few.
Yes, indeed.
Alrighty. So, the first one here comes from Chucksenhausen, who said, "Drinker, all I'll say is that I sent you a Jameson-inspired message on Patreon under the name Charles Caballero, giving my review of Cobra Kai. It was one of the best seasons ever, and if Muller and Disparu sees it, they'll make it a 12-hour video on why Cobra Kai is so hash brown legendary." I mean, I can only hope for that day. I've got a couple of episodes still to go in season 5, but I've been liking it so far. That is what I will say. I'll reserve judgment until I've got until the end. Scott Lawrence said, Handy tip for suffering through the She-Hulk wedding. Jam a fork into your leg, get drunk and high, watch at double speed, blame yourself for giving away your free time and watching Disney trash again. I think
Sounds
we're
like
all in
episode
that.
7.
On work.
That's all
Hey,
of it, really.
it's our jobs, okay?
I mean, I think we can probably safely say if it was just us watching for our viewing pleasure, none of us would be watching She-Hulk.
Not for pleasure. Well, if I was with a bunch of friends
watched a
and we
lot
had
of-
alcohol,
a lot of-
maybe.
Like, I've watched nearly all the CW superhero shows from start to finish. Like, I have...
Mad Men.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Like, I've seen all the remake of Charmed. It's just... no, I've always watched loads of trash television. And I do it at, like, double speed and stuff. But I genuinely think there's something entertaining in something being so awful that it's funny. and that's where I am with She-Hulk. Like, I didn't dread today with She-Hulk. It's not like Rings of Power. Like, I do not want Rings of Power to be on and make that video. But She-Hulk videos like this is going to be fun.
JS Pena says, since October is coming up, I hope to see your Ghostbusters 2 video. I think probably me talking about why it's actually not a terrible film. Also, some films I recommend for review or extra shots are Daybreakers, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and Searching, a thriller with John Cho. There we go. Good recommendations. Dante Gray 1 says, imagine a future where Crow and Tom Servo sarcastically roast the old woke-exploitation flicks of the 20s with the hyena laughs of Rich Evans. We'd all love that, but I don't know if we'll ever get to that point where we look back on this period and go, didn't we all kind of lose our minds there? Glad things evened out.
Yeah, glad things evened out in the year 4000. We
Yeah.
finally got there.
History books will be written about the dark ages of 2020s.
Charles Hurst says, have one for me. I'm currently under General Order 1. It's an army thing, which means no drinking. This live stream will be the highlight of my week. Oh, I'm sorry you can't drink right now, man. But, well, best of luck to you anyway, and hopefully we kept you entertained.
Yeah.
Unhinged says, we've made incredible leaps in science and medicine, cured diseases, created inventions to expand our minds, but we still can't put frosting on both sides of the Pop-Tart. That's a very good point, actually. And
We'll get there one day. We'll crack it.
we have the technology. Slack Attack says, you must swear an oath, Elrond, that you'll never speak of what I'm about to show you. By the way, here's a free sample.
Oh, that bit was insane!
I
Swear
couldn't
on the
handle it.
mountain. It will sacrifice your entire family. Wait, this is fine though. Like and especially as he already said, I basically cannot lie to people. Like there's no secret worth lying for. And just have this thing you can't talk about. See what happens.
RRTNZ says, hail drinker and team, why not follow up your James O'Barr interview with a review or recommends stream on The Crow, a brilliant Halloween movie. Cheers. Funny you should mention that, actually. That would be quite a good one to do. Yeah, I got to interview him at Tampa, and yeah, very interesting guy. Fucked up slightly because someone gave me a bottle of Jack Daniels. You know, what can you do? So I plumped it on the table right in the middle of us when I did my interview with him at the panel, and you know, I was saying to him, so what was your inspiration, James, for doing The Crow? And he straight away started off with, well, my wife was killed by a drunk driver, and so it was a way of dealing with my grief. I just thought, oh fuck, what have I done?
Aww.
Time to hide the Jack Daniels.
As he's talking, you're just slowly inching it off the table.
Yeah, it's just like there, like,
It's like
oh,
scraping.
no. Yeah, I didn't get off to the best start there, but you know, live and learn. Wayland Bucephus says, hopefully nobody's alcoholism affects my alcoholism. If you ever get the chance, you should talk to Jensari1. He does awesome videos on Star Wars. So, Jensari1. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of him.
No.
I'm going to take that as a no, yeah. Mr. Taco Boutique says, Variety put a good article on how Rings of Power's viewership doesn't mean much due to lack of info. Amazon hasn't revealed anything since the debut compared to House of the Dragon. Yeah, and of course they won't because it's behind a streaming wall. So you never know how many people watched
And that's
it.
what I'm hearing is engagement and viewership for House of Dragons going up over time, while Rings is going down. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
My
We'll
favorite
see.
Rings of Power article was the one that said the reviews are pointless. Like they're meaningless because it's getting so many viewers. And like, how do you think people can review it if they don't watch it in the first place? It was literally about the first 2 episodes. Like, oh, it did so well. These reviews mean nothing. It's like, no, episode 3 matters a lot more actually.
It's silly because they think they're hiding it by just not revealing the figures. If you start off by releasing the figures and then you just noticeably don't release any more, the audience doesn't really need to know the precise figures, but the fact you're not releasing them is pretty indicative of the direction of travel. I don't understand why they... I mean, I understand why they think it's a good idea not to release the figures, but if they think that they're actually pulling the wool over people's eyes with this, it's complete nonsense.
Amazon did the same thing with Wheel of Time. The finale came around and they were still hammering home the premiere figures in all their tweets. It was insane.
Are they still going with that Wheel of Time? Is it more episodes, more seasons, or is it stopped?
It's just got renewed for season 3 before season 2. So yeah, it'll go on for... And there's books for series after series after series of that. So they'll have to cancel it because I can't believe they're going to throw the money at it to get to the end.
Well, yeah,
unless they've already rewritten the first book, so maybe he'll just rewrite it so much he just starts skipping books. Possible.
Because speaking of that, when I was on the Adam and Sidge's stream, the guy we were covering who was like, these trolls and bombing reviews, jokes on them. Amazon don't even care if you leave a negative review. This guy hadn't heard of the fact that they stopped people reviewing. Like,
they care. They care a lot.
They care very much. They care a lot.
They've done all kinds of manipulations behind the scenes to try and like cut this out.
During this stream, I've been getting messages that they've deleted a load of 1-star reviews. So I've not looked into it, but that's what I've heard. So
well, like
they
Platoon, did they not manually claim a bunch of your reviews?
11 uploads in a row got manually claimed. And that was like 7 hours per upload as well. So the video was done a week before it went up, and then it was just constantly, and it was weird stuff as well. It was like there was like a 5-second clip, which was fine, and then there was 30 seconds of unrelated footage, and then 5 more seconds of the same clip at the end of that 30 seconds. They claimed the entire sort of 45-second bit as a single clip. And it was like, well, I know if I appeal this, I'm obviously going to win, but you've got a month to release that, and I'm not going to wait for that long. But this happened, like 11 times in a row. I'd had a couple of manual claims before, but not 11 uploads in a row. That was just ridiculous. They are hyper sort of cautious about this show. But I mean, going back on the thing about hiding viewer numbers, though, the annoying thing is that. And it's the same reason that Wheel of Time gets renewed as well. And it's the reason something like Star Trek Discovery can go on for 5 seasons despite being one of the worst things ever created by man, is that there is a point to that. The viewer figures are not the metric which is most important to the streaming service. I mean, it is, are they still gaining subscriber numbers from the release of the show, however bad the show happens to be? Are those subscribers cancelling when they discover that the show is not as good as they thought it was? If they're not cancelling and if they're still boosting subscriber numbers, they will keep going with the show up until the point at which it becomes a genuine money sink. But you are boosting your guaranteed revenue just by getting a big IP, which people go to watch and then just stick around for other services if they find that's not popular. So it doesn't really matter if Rings of Power's viewership is exceptionally high. It's important, but it's not that important. What matters is Amazon Prime now, flush with subscribers that it didn't have before? Yes. So it's done its job. And this is kind of this divorcing of ratings and viewership figures from sort of artistic quality and the success of a show is part of the reason streaming services produce this disproportionately high amount of utter garbage content. Because they're not actually compelled to please the audience, really. They just want the subscribers to come in.
You also have that other article, though, where it said that this will succeed because they needed to succeed. And so you do have to question, like, if whoever's got the power to make the final decision of whether they get axed or not, how likely is it that they actually have all of the data in that meeting? Or did someone just come up with the figures they needed to keep doing what they needed to do?
I think in the case of something like Rings of Power as well, it would be an absolute face-saving exercise. Like, to cancel this before they've done their full 5 seasons that they promised would be unthinkable, because they have chained their reputation to this show to such an extent that, like, to cancel it early would be an admission that, like, their whole platform is a bit shit. They have staked their reputation on this one, and one way or another, I think they're going to see it through.
It was an excellent point they made. Like, if we can't make the biggest fantasy IP of all time successful, we can't make anything successful.
Yeah. The next one was RRTNZ said to promote The Crow further, it's got tons of action, genuine pathos, best alt rock soundtrack ever, and a real life tragedy. Yeah, Brandon Lee got killed. Come on, Drinker, it's deserving. Cheers. Well, I'll see what I can do when October rolls around. Sahitko says, why did they have to make up Elendil's daughter? So far, she has done absolutely nothing in this show. I guess that fits the rest of the show now when I think about it. That is true. She's there basically because this show has to reflect the world we live in today.
Yeah, this character bloat. I mean, what they want to do as well is to do that sort of. It's sort of partly Game of Thrones. And I think I said on EFAP yesterday. It's sort of also redolent of Carnival Row, the Orlando Bloom thing, where you have the daughter of the chancellor and the daughter of the leader of the opposition, or the son of the leader of the opposition, even, or vice versa, who sort of get into a relationship because it allows them to do political intrigue that sort of fleshes out the society in which they live. And you've got the exact same dynamic going on with whatever sister woman's name is and the son of Chancellor Al-Farazan. It's bloat, though. Again, I mean, this is not especially important to the story. They haven't shown us why these characters need to exist yet. I think they'll just do it so they can have these extended sort of Game of Thronesy type political sequences at some point, and no one will care because it's really, really dull.
Yeah, if it's done in such a cat-handed way as they're doing here with like the most clunky dialogue imaginable, like those political intrigue scenes in Game of Thrones worked so well because you had characters that seemed genuinely intelligent, played by good actors, and given great dialogue. When you have none of those things available to you, like it's just going to be an absolute time sink for the show. It's just going to kill the pacing of it. Waylon Bicephus says, having trouble with your AIDS, Mr. Drinker? No, my AIDS are just fine, thank you. Ticking along nicely. The Rotten says, Mauler, hottest Buffy character. Sarah Michelle Gellar, Eliza, Christina, Allison, or other?
Probably Eliza. All at the top peak. I don't know. It's hard not to choose here. Eliza Dushku, for those who don't know, she was in Buffy for like I think season 3, and then she got booted out for a while, story wise.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's super hot.
Who would have picked Allison? The fuck?
I mean, hey, I think she's perfectly fine. It's just when she's up against the other girls, that's not fair. Okay.
That's a high benchmark. JS Pena says late in grooming. Well, we weren't that late, so yeah, not at that point yet. Castles and Curiosity says the drinker is never late, nor is he early. He arrives precisely once he's finished a bottle or 3. That is true. Or Muller has to finish an episode or 3. The Rotten says charisma, not Christina. Stupid brain. Yeah, I think we knew what you were going for there. Charisma Carpenter was hot stuff in the early seasons.
Yep.
Not so much later on, but you know. All right.
What, when she was pregnant, or?
Well, I don't know, like in the later seasons, it was quite obvious she'd had work done. I don't know if it was like, you know, some plastic surgery or whatever, and she definitely had like fake boobs at a certain point, and it was just, yeah, it was a bit off-putting. But in the early seasons, yeah, she was pretty hot.
Mm-hmm.
Next one was, does this dress make my ass look big? Says, does it make me a bad person that when I saw the elf ears on the Legacy Hobbit actors t-shirts, I instantly thought of Dolph Lundgren's trophy necklace from Universal Soldier? Yeah, I get what you're saying there, actually. Yeah, when someone wants to ask him a question and he's like, I'm all ears. Yeah, it was a weird choice. Russell says, in a Royal Rumble between Galadriel, Naru from Prey, Stripe from Gremlins, and Andre the Giant, who would win and who would be out first? Galadriel would win everything, obviously.
Yeah, she dominates.
She's
She has
perfect.
to.
I'm not sure there'd even be a fight. They'd end up fighting for her because she was just so unrelentingly mean to them, and then they'd come to love her, and then they'd go and invade Middle Earth for her.
Yeah.
I would say so. Chris Hart says, Mueller and Drinker, have either of you seen Ray Stevens' Get Serious? It's a 90s musical that talks about cancel culture. If you have, what are your thoughts?
I haven't.
I'm afraid I haven't either, so I have no thoughts for you, my friend. Sorry. J.K. Richardson says, congrats on finally starting. First time catching one of these live, working late at night, trying to become a 3D artist. There you go. Best of luck with that, man. And yeah, we were slightly late, but we got there in the end. Grishang85 says, have you watched Cyberpunk Edge Runner? It's better than anything that the game ever did.
I'm about halfway through, and I'm really
good?
enjoying it so far. Yeah.
Ooh.
The first one I thought was a bit slow, but there was enough intrigue in the characters that really kept me going. And so far, it's just got better and better every episode. Really into it.
Fair dues. Jamie Roshan says, I want to see a Star Wars show or movie set between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back in the heat of the Galactic Civil War. I mean, yeah, there's
Sure.
plenty of eras that you could explore there.
I want to see a good movie from Star Wars. That's I don't really care where it's
No matter
taking
where
place.
it is.
Knife Wielding Women says, after the last EFAP, I'm a bit worried about Mauler's sleep schedule.
Yeah, to be fair, if I was to start complaining, I'd feel guilty because it's even worse for Little Platoon, all right? So
I'm on 90-minute sleep today.
yeah,
Oh,
I'm going to
Christ.
sleep as soon as we're done here as well.
We will probably finish in about 5 minutes. I think we've done, like, we're almost at 3 hours. I'll do a couple more super chats to round it out. Matthew says, hey, thought that this was funny. I missed your plushie campaign and found it in an online police auction. So your plushie was
What?
part of a crime. I don't know what crime it was, but it was a bad plushie. Too much drinking.
What, as in, like, a criminal had bought it, or they'd stolen it off someone?
Or use it as a murder weapon.
Yeah, like it was used as like a silencer for a pistol or something. You know, jam the plushie on. I love that idea. Someone like used a plushie as a criminal weapon. But there we go. But yeah, on that subject, actually, there will be a new run of Drinker plushies that are going to be available very soon for pre-order. So stay tuned. Stephen Bobo says, Critical Drinker, have you seen the new Movie Bob's video that's taking pot shots at you, Mauler, Gary from Nerdrotic, and Ben Shapiro? No?
To be fair, Movie Bob hates the fuck out of all of us, and it's great. He's such a fucking lol cow. Like, I have to remind people every single time he ever pops up. It's like, do you know that one of his most famous tweets is "The Nazis ruined eugenics."
Yeah.
It's such a suspicious tweet. And he said that if he could Thanos snap all conservatives, he would. It's just like, damn, dude. Like.
Yeah, he's a unique one. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, we could get mad at him, but what's the point? Like, he has to wake up every single day of his life and be Movie Bob. So that's the punishment enough.
There's nothing we could do to top that.
If the Nazis ruined eugenics, Movie Bob is a good argument for them. But
Yeah.
We gotta clean up the gene pool, everyone.
Yeah, like Movie Bob, do not practice what you preach. Waylon Bucephus says, never ask for directions in Wales. You'll be cleaning spit out of your hair for a fortnight.
No, you just have to buy a spit shield. It's fine. They supply them all over Wales. You'll be fine.
Hand them out
My
on the
favorite
border.
thing about Wales is because it's got to be translated into Welsh all the time. The mistakes that happened, like there was a sign that was just basically someone's answer phone message, but there was one road in particular where in Wales it said to look the correct direction, and in English it said to look the wrong way. It was like...
It is funny because like the amount of words that get translated over or changes, like they're very similar, but they have like little changes on the ends or something. Sometimes you get the impression without knowing more about language, it's like, you just want to be different, don't you, Wales? You just want to be different.
We've invented the most impenetrable language known to man. Like, German code breakers tried to crack it during World War II, and they were like, nah, fuck, I'm out. Lukey One says, love what you guys do. Just finished Redemption. Good stuff with a badass female that didn't make me feel like less of a man. I'm finally cool with my girl's 14-year-old. He asked that if I knew the drinker. I just said, go away now. Oh, fair enough. And I'm glad you enjoyed the book, my friend, so thank you. And Mr. H says, thank you for all the informative and hilarious content, Drinker. She-Hulk was truly awful today and a new low. I know, we just keep finding new lows every week. For some real comedy, some black comedy, I highly recommend In Bruges and The Guard. Yeah, both good movies. Watched The Guard not that long ago, actually, and it was, Brendan Gleeson at his best. But, yeah, I think we'll do it. That's probably enough super chats for tonight because I think we've been going for about 3 hours, so it's been lovely. But you guys need sleep, particularly Little Platoon, who's like not had any in the past 2 days. But yeah, thank you guys for coming on for this tonight. As always, I very much appreciate it. And the links to everyone's channels are in the description. So if you haven't subscribed to them already, please do give them a subscribe because they absolutely deserve it. And Mauler's plushies are... Oh no, they're just out now, aren't they? They finished at midnight.
All good. I'm sure everyone who wanted one got in. It's all right.
Hopefully, yeah.
Beautiful.
But yeah, do you guys have anything you want to make people aware of at all that you got coming up just before we finish up?
No, for
Nope.
me.
We're all right then.
Rings of Power review is the next thing on my mind. So far,
Yeah.
I'm just going from show to show to show until
Yeah.
some of them start dropping off.
Yeah, I'm fighting at the moment. It's between Andor or Rings of Power. But the episode 3 review for Rings of Power, the script is 2 hours long, and that's going to take a while, and it might even get longer. And then there's episode 4 to add to it. So at some point in the next month, a video might be out, but we'll see.
Yeah, before it gets claimed about a dozen times over. But
Again.
well, best of luck with that anyway. And for everyone that's joined us tonight, thank you for tuning in. It's very much appreciated. Thank you for all the super chats. For the ones that I haven't covered yet, I will absolutely do a catch-up stream to do them all. So they will get answered. And thank you to my mods for doing the same awesome job that they always do. It's very much appreciated. But for now, at least, that's all we got for today. So go away now.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.